Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human and Red Bull enthusiast, Arif Hassan. Arif, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. You didn't need to mention the Red Bull.
I didn't need to mention the Red Bull. I thought that was. I thought you told me that you spilled Red Bull on yourself before the show in order for me to bring it up. I thought that was like. Is that not how our relationship works?
I should never tell you anything. Is how our relationship should work.
Yeah. Well, you learned that a little too late. And with that betrayal, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. It is the off season, the season of betrayal. And while there's not a ton of Vikings news, we did want to come back and talk a little bit about what's been going on in the NFC North. Obviously, the Packers are still in the playoff hunt. The Vikings are definitely out. Chicago found their way out, and Detroit is in the process of hiring coaches, but having better press conferences than Chicago is at the moment. So we got that to talk about. Also, we have a nice large mailbag to fill up the rest of our time. But before we start, just want to thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. Obviously, this season did not go the way that we wanted it to for the Vikings themselves. But overall, this was an interesting season to be sure. And a successful season in a number of respects. And I want to take a special, just like 2 minutes here to thank you guys so much for listening, because we finally hit something that I've been wondering if we were actually going to hit this season. And we lost our stats as to the first like 50 episodes as to how many people had actually listened to the shows, because they were on a different aggregator, they were on a different like distribution system, whatever. But after X number of years, according to our stats, our show has been listened to over 1 million times. And that's a really cool number to hit. That's a really cool number to see when you log in for our stats stuff. So I really want to take a moment here and thank you guys so much for listening over the years, for sharing information out on Norse Code to friends, family, your chiropractor, however you have spread the word. We appreciate it very much. And seeing that a couple days ago, really, it was a nice moment to see. Wow, we actually hit that. So thank you. That was really cool to see.
Yeah, that's it's kind of absolutely wild to think that my stupid takes have been listened to 1 million times in audio form.
It's even stranger for me to think that my stupid takes have been listened to. What has to amount to close to 1 million times at this rate. So, yeah, that's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. You think about it, because this started out when I was a blogger that wasn't getting paid anything at all. This is before SB Nation had a budget to give more than 2 people a stipend plus the site owner. So I was blogging unpaid. We started this, I think, even before I had the Bleacher Report gig that was mostly unpaid until the end. And we started the podcast without really much of an expectation that the podcast itself would produce anything to work with. This is like even before the days that we were hawking. We used to have ads on this podcast. We were hawking. They didn't even call it Daily Fantasy at the time. It's a now dead fantasy service. Was one of the things that we did. We never did MeUndies.
No, we never did MeUndies, but Audible existed, and we got exactly one subscription. Which yeah.
Referral marketing is the devil. It's awful. And we received virtually zero benefit from it. But yeah, we were doing all the small ball podcaster stuff for so long, and I hadn't been making any money from writing about the Vikings. My first couple of trips to training camp, first 3, I want to say, actually, were crowdfunded, and I ended up losing money in every single one of those trips. And I mean, it was dumb. I shouldn't have done any of this. It's a long shot career. The fact that I've been able to make a career out of it, buy a house from it, is a million to one odds. And I'm just really thankful and happy for everybody who is engaged with the stuff that I do, including listening to this podcast and sharing with it. And, and also like keeping things loose, right? Like emailing me about like, hey, if you, James, and Dusty were all on a desert island, who would be eaten first? Like, that kind of just ridiculous, silly stuff. Like, yeah. I think keeping it loose it's so great, because I think if I were just another dry Vikings personality, I think I do bring something unique to the table in terms of Vikings analysis, but I don't think it would be nearly as successful or as appealing. And I'm really glad that everybody who interacts with the show has been able to make sure that we stay on that path and keep that personality there. So, I mean, you all made my career possible. This is just phenomenal stuff. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it was really cool to check that out. And I think I had actually forgotten to message you about it when I had noticed it, like, because I was expecting it to be this episode that ended up crossing it, because it had been like slowly approaching. Like I knew it was going to happen this season, and again, we lost the stats on as to the first 50-ish episodes or whatever. Like if you go into Spotify and go as far back as you can, you're like it's
plus minus of 5,000 total listens. Like honestly, it's not
whatever it was. It probably happened at some point. It probably happened around the Saints game. Like right. somewhere in there, there's a couple of Coach Esser episodes that a couple of people are still listening to, trying to get to the end of.
Right, legend has it, yeah.
At some point, but again, thank you guys so much. It's really cool to be able to share that with you, and to be able to just say we've had 1 million listens to our show. How cool is that? So thank you guys so much again. Really do appreciate it. And hope you guys are ready to get a little bit of postseason content from us, albeit not in the postseason sense of the word that we would like to be covering it. But before we begin the show, just want to make mention of a couple of things. We did get a question into the mailbag that we're just going to answer right now before we do the Patreon stuff. And the question was from Kenneth Allen, who asks, best alternatives to a Super Bowl party given COVID. Should I just make the same amount of food and eat it myself? Consequences be damned. Now, last episode, we discussed whether or not if you could eat something and if it screamed, if you'd be able to continue to eat it. And I can't help but think of that particular question as he decides whether or not to commit, I don't know, queso harikari here. But if you are interested in such silliness, I will be hosting a Norse Code watch-along on Patreon. We've had a couple people say that they were interested, and Don from Ohio will not be able to join us, so if that's your incentive to listen, go ahead and listen. Go ahead and join us over at patreon.com/NorseCode. I will send out the Zoom link about half hour, an hour before the actual game itself, and the person who is the furthest ahead on their TV is just going to have to be muted, and we'll figure that out as it happens. But so we'll be doing that over at Patreon. I will be hosting. We'll see who else ends up coming on, but right now it looks like it's going to be me and a couple of the other Patreon people. So again, if you're interested, patreon.com/NorseCode. We will have more information posted there a little closer to the Super Bowl itself. As for the same amount of food thing, you had an interesting idea as far as Thanksgiving was concerned, and like the neighborhood kind of put sharing like a little portion thing. Yeah. That wouldn't be a bad idea to do for a Super Bowl party that's not really a Super Bowl party.
Yeah. For anybody who missed that, which I don't know how you can listen to this podcast and like it and not listen to the Thanksgiving episode, because it's always this podcast's essence distilled. But but yeah, for anybody who missed that, what Chelsea and I did during Thanksgiving was that we cooked kind of the normal amount, or even a little bit more than that, that we typically would if we were going to host a Thanksgiving, and a lot of our friends did as well. And we just dropped off food on our friends' doorsteps, across the city. And so when we came back, there was extra food that our friends had cooked for us that we all ate. It was really fantastic. And, obviously there's some limitations, like it's food that keeps in Tupperware, right? So you're probably not going to give anybody fried food if you're thinking about it too much. But, I got pierogies. Those keep well. That was really amazing. So, that's something you could do for the Super Bowl. have somebody eat your street tacos or whatever. Actually, I'll talk. We'll talk about Super Bowl recipes on the next episode, where we're talking about primarily Super Bowl props because that's what matters. But yeah, I mean, that was a ton of fun. So do that. Head over to the Zoom call that we'll hold for patrons. I don't know if I'll be able to make it, so don't go in expecting that I'll necessarily be there. I'll see if I can make an appearance or two over the course of the game, because obviously I'm not going to have anybody over, so I might have time, but I also might have responsibilities with the Athletics, so we'll see. But yeah, I mean, it's not exactly a party atmosphere, but it may be the closest thing you can get to it.
Yeah, we had talked at some point before. It was like it's not necessarily the bar full of people thing for watching a game, but it did feel good the last 2 times we did it. So we are going to do it another time here and do it for the Super Bowl. So if you are interested, patreon.com/NorseCode. Also, want to thank these fine people who are subscribed over at Patreon. Want to thank Josh Matthews, thank you, along with Sam Buckley and. I always mess up the last names, and it's something that I pride myself in and being horrible at as someone who has had his last name butchered his entire life. Andrew Priatica, maybe. Let's go with that. Andrew, thank you for not only subscribing, but in advance, thank you for forgiving me for destroying your last name. So, again, patreon.com/NorseCode. Has everything as far as bonus material. In fact, an episode will be coming out later this week for bonus stuff for you guys. Also, you can go to paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up a baby onesie. I almost think we should just eliminate everything but like t-shirts and baby onesies and maybe a mask. Like, these are the things that have sold this year. It doesn't cost any different to have as many things as we do on there, but go ahead to head over to
if you want a little bit more than literally anything else in the store.
It's so weird, and I love it. I love the fact the baby onesie with the Draw Play Dave logo has done so well. But if you go over to norsecode.threadless.com and check out the collections area, there's plenty of random Norse Code swag for you to bathe your family in, bathe your a nice nice thing to give to your 6-week-old. You're like, it'll look cute in that logo, sure, it'll be just fine, and a nice mask. So again, norsecode.threadless.com rather, and check out the collections. All right, we are into the show. Let's talk about kind of the bigger news as far as the Vikings are concerned. The offensive coordinator position has not technically opened up yet, as Gary Kubiak hasn't actually filed for retirement yet. And the one real departure that the Vikings have to report is that George Payton is now a part of personnel over at the Broncos.
Yeah, so the longer it takes for Kubiak to make a decision about whether or not he's retiring, although all of the wording of all the reports about Kubiak's retirement are that he is expected to retire. Because he hasn't made the decision yet, the potential for grabbing, quote unquote, the top offensive coordinator of the market, which, I mean, that's a little bit difficult because, what might be best for one team might not be best for another team, but the top candidates at offensive coordinator are not necessarily going to be available for the Vikings because they'll have to wait because they're not reaching out to anybody, at least as far as we know, in light of this expected retirement. It could be the case that the Vikings are reaching out sort of under the table, as it were, to talk to people and say, hey, if Gary Kubiak retires, would you be willing to come on board? But out of respect for Kubiak, please don't, leak it to the media or announce it or anything like that. But, should that happen, we'd love to have you on board. That could be possible. I believe it is the case now that teams can no longer block non-coordinator assistant coaches from interviewing for offensive coordinator jobs, like the old rule where you could not block somebody for interviewing for a head coach job. So I believe that's the case. So it is not as restrictive as it used to be. So it is not as much of a problem as it used to be. It could also point to the likelihood, or at least the higher likelihood, that the Vikings will look internally for an offensive coordinator. That could very well mean that they'll combine positions, right? So Clint Kubiak, for example, could be the quarterbacks coach / offensive coordinator, or it could be that they'll have an entire promotion upward. So they could, for example, promote Rick Dennison to offensive coordinator, have the assistant offensive line coach, who I think is Janoko, become the offensive line coach. And then if they need an assistant offensive line coach in addition, maybe promote, quality control assistant up there if they feel like that person is ready. So that seems like it's more likely now than it was before because they haven't announced Kubiak's retirement. The Vikings have like this strong feeling about, giving Cousins consistency and over the course of his career. He hasn't had consecutive offensive coordinators for one reason or another, and so having that continuity and consistency between offensive coordinators, or at least language within the system, is something that they have prioritized a lot or have talked about a lot. So that could be a stronger indication that they'll look to Clint Dennison or Clint Kubiak or Rick Dennison as the OC. That said, there are potentially, people in assistant coach positions that they could choose to interview or offer jobs for the offensive coordinator position. Somebody in the mailbag asked about Bill Callahan, which I think would be great. He's a ton of experience in the NFL and in college as an offensive coordinator and calling plays in a West Coast system that actually tends to, like the Viking system, that tends to take a lot of deep shots. Obviously, he also was the offensive line coach for a really phenomenal, like a top 3 offensive line in the NFL with the Browns offensive line. And so, he might be able to help identify talent there as well. So that could be a possibility that they could reach out to Bill Callahan. I don't know if they will, but someone asked that question, and I think that's not a bad idea. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously they could ask Kubiak's secretary to be in office. Like, I don't know, right? Somebody's had a cup of coffee with Sean McVay, right? Like, they could become the offensive coordinator. Now it's going to be more difficult for teams to kind of block that move forward. There's not any movement here yet. As far as I know, no other beat reporters have indicated that there's been movement. Gessling and Graf and Cronin, I don't think have reported anything along the lines of who the Vikings might be considering in light of a Kubiak retirement. So there's not much clarity there. Similarly, with the general manager thing, or at least with the assistant general manager, George Payton, there is not a lot of clarity about what exactly the Vikings are losing. He never did interviews with the media. He was very closed off. Every time someone tried to do a story on him, they were kind of politely shut down. He didn't want that much attention, so people kind of respected that. But it left us with this issue where we kind of don't know what his job is or how important he is to the organization. We do know that he's extremely highly regarded and has been getting interviews for years and years and years. I believe has been connected to either in terms of interviews or has been offered interviews anyway, with the 49ers, with the Chargers. And this is over the course of the year. So it wasn't like last year or 2 years ago or anything like that. But, before John Lynch was hired, the 49ers, a while ago, the Chargers, a while ago, the Jets, he turned them down. I think, he interviewed recently with the Broncos. He interviewed actually the Broncos are the ones that hired him. He interviewed with the Lions. And he's had interviews with other teams as well. So, he's been a highly sought after general manager candidate, which means that, people kind of hold him in high regard, which probably tells us something, that the Vikings are losing something potentially substantial with this. I don't know if the Vikings have announced a promotion to replace him. My guess is it would be Jamal Stevenson. The Vikings really seem to love him. He's the director of college scouting right now. But who knows? Maybe they don't have that position because it's not necessarily a position that demands to be filled. So I don't know what he did. I don't know how important he is. I don't know how good he is at his job. But I mean, the signs seem to indicate that he is important. The Vikings held him in high regard. Spielman in particular holds him in high regard. And he has followed Spielman from Chicago to Miami to Minnesota and has been in the organization for a very long time, 14 years, I think. So yeah, I can't tell you precisely what is lost here, but something. So that's the Vikings news I have. It's I have no idea what's going on, and who knows what happened.
Well, that's comforting.
Yeah. That's why they pay me the big bucks.
Yes, exactly. So the Vikings haven't made anything kind of abundantly clear as to what their intention is at the moment. Whether or not they go in-house, whether or not they begin to shop out, but time is kind of running out for some of these offensive coordinator candidates, though.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine. I mean, some of the offensive coordinators, I mean, some staffs have already been set. Josh McDaniels, who is going to be hired or has already been hired by the Eagles, has already started building his staff. I know that. Somebody just got hired at the Chargers too, right? There's a new Chargers head coach. I think he's building his staff. No, they haven't hired. There's just rumors. No, it is Brandon Staley. Yeah, he's already hired his. He's already looked into who his offensive coordinator should be. That I think is the most interesting hire thus far, just because of how he's kind of changed the way that people look at defenses. But
and the Jags are in the process of making a few interesting decisions.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Also, Arthur Smith to the Falcons too. So those coaches have already been hired. They've already begun to reach out to potential offensive coordinators. I'm really curious as to what Urban Meyer is going to do in Jacksonville. I think he has reached out, and there have been like names added to the list of people that would potentially be offensive coordinator. Like I know, for example, defensively, Charlie Strong has been added on as the DC as well as the assistant head coach. I don't know. Is Doug Marrone? Doug Marrone might be the Alabama offensive line coach. That's it. But yeah, who Urban Meyer hires as an offensive coordinator, I think that person is going to end up being like a good get. I think it'll be difficult for the Vikings to pry whoever they want. I know that they're looking at Raheem Morris for the defensive side of the ball. But yeah, I mean, there's Scott Linehan is the potential offensive coordinator. Yeah, so who cares about that? That's a terrible decision. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these head coaching positions have been filled, which means that a lot of the offensive coordinators that are potentially on the market have already been contacted, whereas it seems like the Vikings have not contacted anybody and are potentially behind in the process. So yeah, we'll see how the Vikings handle this. It really does seem like there are more and more signs pointing to this being fulfilled potentially internally. But we'll see. And also, it seems like because a lot of that hires are offensive, that the offensive coordinator hires for a lot of these teams may not end up mattering. That's not going to be true for the Chargers because it's a defensive hire. But it may not end up mattering because those guys might design the offense and call plays, and the offensive coordinator could be more of an administrative position. And so it might actually be a little bit easier. Who knows? But the rule that gives the Vikings and other teams the ability to interview for coordinator positions, independent of the other assistant coach positions without getting blocked, that does soften the blow.
So let's move on from the Vikings news and talk about a couple of teams in the NFC North. Let's start with the Bears, because I think the Bears are a little bit more interesting than the Lions at the moment. The Bears ended up losing the playoff game to the Saints on Nickelodeon.
On Nickelodeon, yeah.
That was a fun little bit of moment. I asked because I didn't, for whatever reason, I didn't have Nickelodeon up for most of the game, and people were like, "Oh yeah, it's amazing," and the between the graphics and the explanations of penalties, which the highlights later were like, "Okay, well that's kind of interesting." The fact that Mitch Trubisky won the MVP,
the Nickelodeon valuable player. It's not even like an adjective, right? It's not like. Was he the most Nickelodeon player? Like in that sense, yeah, I suppose. But this was Nickelodeon valuable player.
He was the most slime.
He was. He did not bring people to the slime zone, but he was the most slime.
Well, until the very end of the game, yes.
Yeah.
But so the Bears backed themselves into a playoff situation. They found themselves playing against the Saints. They got stomped, and then the Bears held a press conference about a week ago that was different. Maybe different's not the right word for it, but it didn't have a lot of answers. And if you kind of squinted, you could make a few changes and not notice a difference.
Yeah, so this is really phenomenal. So there's a write-up at Bears Wire. I want to credit, we'll link it in the show notes, obviously. I want to credit Brendan Sugru for writing this up. But so we're gonna steal your words, Brendan, but we're gonna strategically replace certain things. But before we get to that part, which I think is great, it is notable, right? That so they hold this press conference, and the Bears beat writers asked some very basic, but probing, tough questions that the Bears seemed unprepared to answer. So when George McCaskey opened the presser, obviously he did the normal things. He thanked the Bears for doing what they did, especially in a tough season full of COVID. But Dan Weeder of the Chicago Tribune asked what progress the Bears had made this past season, and McCaskey was only able to mention their 5th-round rookie Darnell Mooney, who, maybe I was a little bit mean by saying 5th-round rookie, but he's had a really great year, but that's it, right? And then Weeder also pressed about the fact that McCaskey made the same statements last year, following their 8-8 season, and McCaskey was caught off guard and just reiterated that Pace and Nagy were the best guys for the job. Then McCaskey had a vague answer to the question about what convinced him the most about Pace's plan, and then he just talked about Pace's thoroughness, I guess, and just for the most part did not seem to have answers as to why the Bears can have been considered to have meaningfully improved. And it very much seemed like that had the Bears not backed into a playoff spot that did not exist in previous years, that the answers would be much different. But they backed into a playoff spot, and it substantially changed the way the Bears approached this offseason. So we're going to read the snippet from this piece, and I'm going to change a couple of words. Remember, this is about the Bears. I'm going to change a couple of words, and we'll see kind of exactly what this looks like. When the Vikings defeated the Houston Texans to snap their losing streak last month, some fans began dreaming of a possible playoff run and believed everything was fixed. Quarterback Kirk Cousins got the best of Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson, and the defense smothered the Houston offense. And then they beat up on some bad teams, and everything felt like 2017 all over again, except many knew it was fool's gold. Yes, the Vikings did back into the postseason, nearly back into the postseason, only to get stomped by the New Orleans Saints. But nobody felt confident that this team could actually make any sort of run. But according to management, it was enough to run it all back. Wilf, Zimmer, and Spielman all spoke glowingly of Cousins' ability to lead the team out of the losing streak and make the postseason for the second time in 3 years. They did seem to forget how they got into that mess in the first place, but it doesn't matter because the Vikings nearly secured the 7th and final seed in the postseason, a seed that was just added this year. It's not far-fetched to say that one Bears win was the deciding factor as to whether or not the sweeping changes were made at all. The NFL is a results-based business, and, I'll give some credit to Wilf and Spielman for judging this playoff berth objectively in a way, since it still does count, potentially, nearly as a trip to the postseason. They earned that result. But you're naive or just lazy if you do not look at the events preceding that near playoff berth.
Yeah.
I screwed up a couple of words, but I think you got the idea, right? You just changed a couple of words.
Two sides of the same coin there, as it turns out.
So as we evaluate this offseason, think about what you think about the future of the Bears franchise. Just think about that for a second. Most people listening to this podcast don't think the Bears franchise is headed in a positive direction, right? Yeah, 2 playoff berths in 3 years, but it just does not seem like it's got anything going for it. It's not going to meaningfully compete.
Be like a question mark at quarterback, severe question marks as far as what you're going to be doing offensively. You have a single wide receiver. You had a team of tight ends and don't appear to have one anymore. You have the world's greatest kick returner and a defense that fell apart. What do you have exactly? Oh, no.
Right, yeah, I mean, it feels like the Bears are just not a meaningfully competitive team. So think about that. And then think about the fact that you could have just written in the Vikings for this 4-paragraph essay on why the Bears playoff run doesn't mean anything at all, and how maybe the Bears probably should not be as confident about their ability to run it back as they seem to be. So keep that in mind as we continue to discuss the Vikings. I do think that the Vikings are better positioned for the future than the Bears are because I'm a very quarterback-focused football analyst, and I think Cousins is just a lot better than Trubisky. So there's that, but keep all that in mind.
Yeah, the fact that we were able to just play, we were just kind of messing around preseason or not preseason, pre-show with this piece, and it was like, hey, wait a second. The Vikings turned it around after the defeating Deshaun Watson. Let's see how far this rabbit hole goes. And just kind of stumbled into that. So yeah, it's interesting, and got the whole line from the front office that this is the team we want moving forward. This is the coaching staff we want moving forward here, and it didn't really inspire a lot of confidence in the Bears faithful. The Lions, however, are have they formally hired their coaches now? There seems to be a lot. There certainly was a lot of talk about it.
Yeah, well, I do really quickly want to mention the Bears do have a coaching change, right? So Chuck Pagano retired, and so they have now interviewed, as far as I can tell, at least 2 defensive coordinator candidates. One of them is James Betcher, who last coordinated the Giants defense. I believe they ranked 30th out of 32 teams. I don't know why I said that last part. I think most people listening to this know how many teams are in the NFL. But he ranked 30th in points allowed, which is interesting. But also did technically coach a Arizona defense in 2015, ranked 7th in points allowed. That said, the Giants defense improved to 9th in points allowed when he left. Now, they did add James Bradbury and Blake Martinez, and I actually think both of them have played phenomenal football, but it is pretty interesting that they've probably played the best football of their lives under their current defensive coordinator, who is not James Betcher, notably. So that is one potential. The other one seems to be, as far as I can tell, George Edwards, who was an assistant with the Cowboys last year, just a defensive assistant. I don't think he held a particular position, and that's it. So he could potentially finally call plays for the Bears defense, but I don't know that either of these are necessarily awe-inspiring because he didn't do anything for Minnesota, and Minnesota did not choose to re-up his contract when it expired. So there's that. Now for the Lions, they did decide to hire Brad Holmes as their general manager. He seems to be a very analytics-focused general manager. Remember, they were in the hunt for George Payton, and he seems to have a good understanding of the way that organizations should build and run. I don't know that you can say anything about what it's going to mean going forward, aside from the fact that the Lions seem to be kind of focused on finding analytical edges. So that's about as much as I can get. He comes, I believe, from the Rams front office, and they've done a pretty good job of acquiring talent over the years. I think that the flexibility of Sean McVay as an offensive coordinator is going to do a lot. Plus, how they're going to be able to fill the defensive coordinator position with Brandon Staley is going to mean a lot. But for the most part, they seem to do a good job of acquiring talent. So that's what the Bears did at GM. They did hire a head coach, Dan Campbell, the eternal tight ends coach that was once an interim coach for the Miami Dolphins, coached them to 2 wins, I believe. So everyone is a huge fan of him, so much so that the Dolphins did not elect to retain him. Everyone seems to think that this is a good hire. I don't really know why, but there was a lot of steam that Dan Campbell would be a head coaching candidate. Lo and behold, he was, and a lot of steam that he would be a good head coaching candidate. I don't know why. That said, I don't actually think that the lack of a resume is necessarily all that meaningful. I mean, Brian Flores was the linebackers coach for the Patriots, and he's turned into what seems to be a pretty good coach, while the defensive coordinator for the Patriots' excellent defenses over the past couple of years turned out to be an awful head coach. So I don't know that, looking at how a coordinator does, or even how a position group does, tells us how good of a head coach somebody is going to be. So from the outside looking in, I don't know that we have a ton of information that this is a good hire or a bad hire. It just doesn't instantly strike me as all that good. But, who knows, right? I don't think we have enough information to say one way or the other. That said, they did hire a defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, who is the defensive backs coach, or was the defensive backs coach for the Saints. Again, we don't know how much, coaching prowess translates into coaching capability, but the Saints' defensive backfield was very good, quite good, and I think that there's some really good evidence that coaching seemed to matter there, because a lot of players that otherwise weren't playing all that great, except for Patrick Robinson, played better with the Saints. Marshawn Lattimore, Marcus Williams for a while. Just that group of defensive backs is very good, and I think that if it means anything, that means they've got an interesting defensive coordinator. So there's that. I don't know what they're doing at offensive coordinator yet. Maybe I just haven't seen it. But yeah, that's what we have.
And obviously Green Bay is still in the playoffs. Green Bay is set to take on Tom Brady this weekend to see who represents the NFC in the Super Bowl. And
cheering for the AFC this year.
Yeah, definitely cheering for the AFC this year. I'm trying to decide, because when I was watching the Saints and the Bucks, I was trying to figure out if I would be okay with seeing Green Bay in the Super Bowl again this year, if it meant that A, Tom Brady didn't get another ring, and B, that Drew Brees definitely didn't get another ring this year.
To me, I think, so I hate both quarterbacks, right? Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. I obviously also hate Drew Brees. I think someone asked on the show like a couple of weeks ago, I don't know, a while ago, Arif, are there any quarterbacks you do like? And if there are, I don't talk about them.
Because it's better to just not play favorites at all, or appear to not play favorites at all, and just say that you hate everyone.
Yeah, it's much easier. But yeah, I hate all three of them. But I think that Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers, their legacy is meaningfully impacted by getting another ring. They rise in public estimation. It means a lot more to them. And so I'd rather Tom Brady get the ring, because 6th to 7th, who cares? Great. You've got more rings than everybody. I don't care. People consider you the greatest quarterback of all time anyway. If you're title focused, that's just what you think, right? So I don't think it changes the legacy at all. Maybe sometime down the road, Patrick Mahomes is vying for a 6th ring, can't get it, and someone's going to say, well, if Tom Brady had only had 6 rings, I would say maybe it was close, and you could say you give it to Patrick Mahomes, but Tom Brady has 7 and Mahomes doesn't. And so when he retires and he's only got 5 rings, he's only the 2nd greatest quarterback. That's the only scenario where it seems to matter.
QB wins.
Right. If that's how you're evaluating things, I can't change your mind anyway. But I think that Brady or Rodgers going from 1 to 2, or Brees going from 1 to 2, that's huge, right? I think it's like when Eli went from 1 to 2. Yeah, it's the Eli. How there's what's the line in baseball? The 200. The Mendoza line. Yeah, it's the Manning line. 2 rings. Right?
Oh yes.
Yeah, so the Mendoza line for Hall of Fame quarterbacks, for whatever reason, unless you're as productive as Dan Marino, which I guess Drew Brees is, but is you can be in the conversation of being a top 10 quarterback of all time if you've got 2 rings, and I guess Marino's in it, so maybe it's the top 5 quarterback of all time, but soon it'll be top 10, right? You can be in that conversation if you've got 2 rings. Seems to be the way people are treating this. And if they don't get 2 rings, then it's going to be much harder for people to make the argument. It's much more meaningful for them to get that 2nd ring. I think it's more painful for them to lose out on an opportunity to get a 2nd ring than it is painful for Tom Brady to lose out on an opportunity for a 7th ring. As much as Tom Brady would say otherwise, because he's homicidally competitive, as all of these great athletes tend to be. So I would rather deny the quarterbacks I hate something much more meaningful than deny Tom Brady, 6 to 7. So that's how I'm going to direct my vibes, which is like my bit now.
that's your new way in 2021.
Yeah. We don't talk about momentum. We don't talk about keeping the faith. We don't talk about, cheering plans. We don't talk about jinxes. We talk about vibes.
I don't remember signing on for this. Did we talk about this pre-show? I feel like this is a change of direction.
No, that would ruin the vibe.
That would. Oh well, I suppose you're right.
So I think we're an All Vibes podcast. I have an All Vibes Twitter account, and my vibe energy is is to deny Rodgers and Breeze their critical second ring.
I don't know how to take any of this. This is
Yeah, well, what do your vibes tell you?
this is a bit like there's that conversation that happens when you first come back from college. And it's not that you've been there for the 4 years, it's that you've been there for 3 months. And you come back for like Thanksgiving. And you run into maybe it's at the bar, maybe it's just people at the town. You run into people you went into high school with, and everyone talks a little bit differently now that they've gone to college. And there's that one kid who took that took a philosophy class that's like a month into it, and now he seems to know everything about everything. And he goes, man, you're not going to believe. That's exactly why you believe in this sort of thing. That's exactly what you sound like right now, is you're talking about vibes in football.
I don't know what you're talking about, man. It's okay. So I understand this philosophy kid that you're talking about. I was probably that kid for a bit, except in high school. I did it before I entered college.
Oh, you took the hipster approach. You did it before it was cool to do that. Okay, yeah.
Before it was extremely uncool to do that.
Fair
but mostly because I didn't go to classes in college, so I can't really say that a class changed my outlook on life.
Okay. Well, yeah, that does. We'll cover that more in your James Madison acceptance speech for your honorary degree.
How many of you went to every class? Raise your hands. Okay, you put it down. We don't want to hear about you.
Yeah.
All right, see? Classes are irrelevant. None of you had perfect attendance, yet you're all here. That's going to be part of the commencement speech. No, I'm just saying that I'm not pioneering anything. I'm not revealing a hidden truth. I'm just looking at the same truths from another perspective. Vibes.
All right, so this is the podcast where Rafe discovered drugs. Good times. I'm still trying to figure out if I'm
on my second Red Bull, but I've only consumed one Red Bull.
I'm going to leave that one alone and say that I would be perfectly content in a matchup that had the Bills against the Packers. I think Bills against...
Yeah, that sounds like chaos. I like that.
That would be...
Plus, you get another Jair Alexander, Stephon Diggs matchup. That's funny to me.
That is beautiful. I want that. So if anyone's going to deny Aaron Rodgers a second ring, I want it to be Stephon Diggs. Especially
if it was a last-second play. If he did that to Breeze and Rodgers, good Lord.
Yeah, at that point, why don't you already have a statue of him outside of US Bank Stadium?
Yeah, can you imagine the vibes?
God, stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. I will turn this podcast around. Do not even tempt me. We're going to go to the mailbag now, and you're going to like it, and you're going to answer this question about Deshaun Watson.
Whoa, you're harshing my mellow.
Alex is asking, is trading for Deshaun Watson even within the realm of possibility for the Vikings, and what would it take for that to happen? Now, it is important to note that the Texans are saying aloud to anyone who will listen, we're not trading Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, we have no intention of trading Percy Harvin. Got it.
Yeah, Deshaun Watson, however, is...
Deshaun Watson disagrees.
He seems to have a different take on the matter, and it's been said that he's willing to waive his no trade clause in order to get the hell out of Dodge. So, is trading for Deshaun Watson even in the realm of possibility for the Vikings? We could just do heads up Cousins for Watson, right?
I don't see why that would be an issue for anybody.
Yeah.
It is a seller's market for Deshaun Watson. Yes, he wants out, and theoretically that would reduce his asking price. But given the number of teams that are interested in his services, the price is just going to be high. The only reason that a person wanting out would lower the price is because it reduces the number of potential buyers, their own team, by one. That doesn't really matter here. There's going to be a ton of potential buyers. So I would imagine Watson would go for, 3 firsts and a second and some more, right? Like Khalil Mack pre-contract, but knowing that he was going to have to sign a new contract, went for 2 firsts. So Deshaun Watson would at least be another first and a second. Actually, Khalil Mack also went for, there's like a second, so I don't remember, but there's like a swap of picks and stuff like that. I would imagine that Deshaun Watson goes for that, plus a first, plus a second, plus maybe a little bit more. So that is going to be the potential asking price. Now, remember, the Jets and the Jaguars have more ammo than anybody else. I don't imagine the Jaguars are going to trade their first overall pick. So it's probably the Jets, but the Jets have, I believe, 2 first-round picks, I want to say, right? Because the Jamal Adams trade. And so they've got a lot more because their first-round pick is this year, which means you don't have to deal with the discount of future first-round picks, which is typically considered 1 round removed. So next year's first is considered this year's second and so on. But if you're also trading this year's second, you don't have access to that, so you trade next year's first, et cetera. So with that in mind, the Vikings would also have to trade a package of players. Now, if they traded players, they're going to have to incur some dead cap. Luckily, in this scenario, obviously the Vikings would want to offload the Cousins contract. If the Vikings traded Cousins before March 3rd, they would be able to absorb the Watson contract coming in because the Texans will take on their own dead space or dead cap from the Watson contract and then take on the new money from the Cousins contract and vice versa. And so they would be able to do that. So Kirk Cousins would be part of the trade. And I imagine that if you traded Kirk Cousins right now from the Vikings, it would be worth a first. And I know that a lot of people don't really like that idea. I think that because he's a quarterback and he's in top 10-ish range, even if he can't beat you over the ceiling, I think that he would be worth a first. With that in mind, that takes care of one of the firsts. The Vikings would then send over one of their own firsts. They'd probably send something worth a 3rd-round pick, like, for example, the current 3rd-round pick, as well as, say, Anthony Barr. And that offloads another contract. Now, at that point, the Texans are now absorbing a lot more in terms of contracts. So those aren't, perfect. But I say that even with the contract value, that's worth a first and a third, Cousins and Barr. So now you're trading 2 firsts, 2 thirds. You probably trade next year's first. You probably trade next year's second. And then you're in striking distance. I don't think that'll be enough. I'll say it's in the realm of possibility. I'll say I think it's unlikely. I'll say it's probably under 5% in terms of like 1 in 20 odds. I think it's below that. But I think it's in the realm of possibility. I do think that including Kirk Cousins in that trade conversation is going to be part of it. And I would think that the Vikings might not want to do it for a couple of reasons. First, they don't typically make these moves. Obviously, when they traded for Sam Bradford, that was a huge splash, but it was right before the season, kind of like the unique Ngakoue trade.
And that was done basically because they felt like they had all the pieces.
Yeah, exactly. They felt that they were ready to make a Super Bowl run, and then the quarterback blew up. And so they were like, well, we just got to get a quarterback, and we're good. And, they weren't like right, but they weren't, crazy wrong either based off of what they did with Case Keenum. The Vikings have felt like on the verge for a while, so I can see why this would be attractive. But I think that part of the reason they feel like they're on the verge is because they've got all this chemistry and everything's working together. I think it would take a lot for me to say that it's a bad idea. I think that this is something the Vikings should pursue aggressively. The risk here, and the second reason, and I think this is a significantly less important reason, but it's one worth considering, is if they don't get to execute the deal, and remember, they are probably not the top buyers on the market because the Jets get to trade Darnold, who's worth, friggin' a third, and 2 firsts from this year and a second from this year. They have much more ammo to work with because of the Jamal Adams trade. Deshaun Watson would have to waive the no trade clause, but also he liked an Instagram post about a potential trade to the Jets. So maybe he would. I don't know. It's 2021. This is what we talk about.
Yeah.
But, we've been talking about this stuff since like 2017. But we found out that Diggs wanted to leave based off of Instagram. It's all there. But I think that the risk that the Vikings don't win the competition to grab Deshaun Watson, don't have enough pieces to grab him, and then it's leaked that the Vikings sought trade talks for Deshaun Watson, they don't want that leak. They don't want to make it seem like Kirk Cousins isn't their guy. Cousins has talked in the past about how important it is to have confidence. I think the Vikings believe that it's important for everybody to unquestionably understand who the quarterback is. The Vikings understood that specific dynamic in 2017, even when the quarterback was winning games. And so I think that risk is another thing that might potentially hold them back. So yeah, that it's in the realm of possibility. I think it's very unlikely, but I think it would take Cousins, a first this year, a first next year, maybe Barr, a third, maybe Riley Reif. I just don't see why they would have Riley Reif, but maybe because they've got Laramie Tunsil, and I don't think they hate their right tackle either. The Alabama Tech guy, I think, Titus Howard. But, maybe, I don't know. But, Anthony Barr, Kirk Cousins, first, next year's first. So that's 3 firsts essentially, a second, and then a third, maybe. But yeah, that could be what that offer is. Does it gut the team? A little bit. You don't get first for a couple of years. That kind of sucks. And you don't get seconds for 2 years in a row. But I think you can attract some free agents with the new cap space you have too.
Well, but the cap space ends up being a major thing, especially next year, and we'll talk about that a little later.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, and that gives the Vikings a little bit more flexibility because they need that flexibility going forward anyway. So yeah, I mean that's all kind of on the table, but I think that might be what it takes, maybe a little bit more than that. But I don't think the Vikings pursue it.
It's the sort of thing that a team that's like on that threshold could potentially make. And I'm not entirely sure that the quarterback position is really the biggest problem for Minnesota.
Oh, it certainly isn't. But improvements at the quarterback position pay you back in wins more than anything else, right? So like a marginal improvement results in more wins.
Yes.
Which tells you how bad the Texans were. Jesus.
And that's the thing, is that you're probably not going to get Deshaun Watson for less than 2 to 3 number ones plus, because Bill O'Brien is no longer the GM there.
Yeah, well, you're not getting him for a second, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Now that they've got a real GM. Yeah.
Now that somebody who's not just throwing a dart at a board with a bunch of potential options for, we'll take a 5th for him. It'll be fine. It's like,
yeah. He wants to leave. What else could we get? Let's not ask any other team about this guy.
Exactly. It's not like the Arizona Cardinals are going to go on a tear with him or anything. It's not going to motivate him or anything. It'll be fine.
It's not like he's going to emerge as one of the 2 best receivers in the NFL.
And looking at what the Bears gave up, because the Khalil Mack trade really is a good starting place for just how massive this trade would have to be. The Bears gave up first-round picks in 2019 and 2020, a third-round pick in 2020, and a sixth-round pick in 2019 to acquire Khalil Mack. In return, the Bears also received a second-round pick in 2020 and a conditional fifth-round pick in 2020.
Yeah, so they traded a third and got a okay, got it. Yeah. Which is why people only talk about the 2 first-round picks, because they traded away a third and got a second back, which net is basically the 6th-round pick they traded away, or net a 4th-round pick plus the 6th-round pick they traded away. So essentially, traded away 2 first-round picks, and then some change at the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just looking at something like that, I'm not sure you could talk me into the Vikings disassembling whatever in order to find themselves in this spot. For the same reason that I would kind of find it hard to believe that like the Jets would want to like actually go in on this idea in order to pick up Deshaun Watson because of just how valuable a rookie quarterback salary is.
That's interesting. It is worth pointing out that the 2 NFC participants are on veteran quarterback salaries, and the Chiefs on the other side in the AFC technically are benefiting from the cap space of a rookie contract, but have also just committed massive amounts of future money to Patrick Mahomes, literally $500 million. I guess not guaranteed, but, I would be shocked if by the end of his career he does not make at least $500 million.
Yeah.
But yeah, the perceived value of a rookie quarterback contract, I think, is higher than the actual rookie quarterback contract value. And that's what's important in a trade, is the perceived value. So it is true that the Jets may not want to part with Sam Darnold because of the potential for the value of a rookie quarterback. And then also, in addition to that, the Jets need to build a team around their quarterback, and trading away assets to grab Deshaun Watson does get you a much better quarterback to build around, but you've also don't have the pieces anymore to build around that quarterback. You've traded away a huge defensive asset in order to get in Jamal Adams, in order to get Deshaun Watson as part of the ammo that you offer, but now you don't have the ability to like continue to upgrade the offensive line after getting Mickey Becton. You don't have the ability to grab receivers, which like feels important to me. I think as the Texans demonstrated. So yeah, there's that. Also, here's an interesting a parallel. So when the Rams traded for Jared Goff in unknown, right? Like we had no idea if Jared Goff was going to be any good. They traded 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and 2 third-round picks. And one of the first-round picks, one of the third-round picks was the following year. But that is also something to consider, is that they traded away 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and 2 thirds. So I imagine Deshaun Watson, who is confirmed good but not on a rookie contract, would be beyond that, would be an additional first and maybe an additional second. So there's that. Also, the Rams got back like a 4th and a 6th, which, whoop-de-doo.
You know what would be an interesting team for him to land on? Would be the Lions.
Oh, Jesus. Don't do that, man.
That would be... I'm not saying... obviously, the Vikings would have to play him twice a year, but like that would be an interesting fit. I'd be curious to see how that would end up working if Stafford left / ended up somehow as the quarterback of the New Orleans Saints. One statue for another.
You could trade Stafford to the Texans, and then do the Texans trade him to the Saints if he wanted to go? And that way nobody has to build up a deal and
release him.
Yeah, so the benefit here to the Saints is that they take on very little of his cap, right? So if they sign him on the open market, they have to take a cap hit now. So a 3-way trade for Stafford puts the dead money on the Lions, and Stafford still gets that much cash, but they only take a small amount in terms of their cap, right? Because the Saints have huge cap, worse than the Vikings, huge cap problems. So the Texans it'd be a 3-way trade where the Lions would end up with Deshaun Watson and the Saints would end up with Matthew Stafford, and the Texans would get a bunch of picks, like 8 million picks, right? From both the Saints for Stafford and from the Lions for Deshaun Watson.
That for whatever reason, I just find that idea fascinating of Deshaun Watson in a Lions uniform and
throwing to Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones and having DeAndre Swift in that backfield. Plus, that offensive line's not awful.
Nope, and TJ Hawkinson is beginning to emerge as he's good as a pretty good tight end.
So you've got a decent core. I would want to invest another kind of mid-round pick. They also have got Quintus Cephas, who I'm a huge fan of. They let go of Marvin Hall for some reason. But they have Quintus Cephas. They should invest maybe another 3rd-round pick as Marvin Jones continues to age. But yeah, that would be a really exciting offense to have to deal with. Defensively, obviously, they have to do a lot more work. But
that's your first move as the new GM of the Detroit Lions.
Yeah,
like,
I'm a huge analytics guy. I've studied all the numbers, and we have decided to grab the best quarterback.
Like, listen, I know that Matt Stafford is beloved in this community and has been since the moment he showed up with a backwards hat on and was somehow not bro-ish, but
right, he hasn't turned into a bad leader like Colin Cowherd said he would.
No, so we're gonna be a part of a trade. We're gonna get him down there. We're gonna trade away our entire future for the next 2 years. But we're going to have Deshaun. We're probably going to make a wild card spot if we can just keep the defense from letting in 40 points a game.
Yeah, that's all you have to do at that point is just hope that the Aaron Glenn guy is not that bad at coaching up the defense. You've got the bones. You don't have linebackers. That seems to be an issue. You don't have defensive linemen. That seems to be an issue. But you got defensive backs, and this guy's a defensive backs guy. So we don't have to hold him to 20 points a game. We just have to hold him to 38 because we'll score 40.
This is not the worst idea in the world. That if I'm listening as a Lions fan, this could be somewhat feasible. Also from Alex, is the Browns offensive line coach being looked at for a offensive coordinator job?
Who knows, man? There have been no leaks as far as the recording of this. I mean, by the time we release this, who knows? Maybe Kubiak announces, and then 8 leaks come out about potential offensive coordinator candidates.
Yeah, and they all come from former Seahawks. All come from former Seahawks offensive positions. We're just really, that's where we're going with this.
We're going to run the ball, and then we're going to run the ball.
Yeah. Raul asks, for life, it has been said that one should foster one's strengths instead of improving one's weaknesses. Can that same be said for the 2021 Minnesota Vikings? Should fostering the offense be favored over improving the defense? To give a first-round example that rolls Tide, Alabama wide receiver Waddle over Bama defensive tackle Barr.
So first, I don't know that that thing about life is all that true. Maybe. I mean, it's probably both, right? I don't know, man. These truisms seem too easy to me.
I mean, I would have expected with your whole vibes thing for you to be more apt to give this one a shot, but
no, I'm just saying that you should follow your passions, and that does mean fostering your own strengths. But unless you take care of your weaknesses, they'll bite you in the ass. That just seems kind of normal to me, right?
Well,
don't let anyone harsh your vibes. That's how you should approach life.
It's like Marshawn. It's like Marshawn Lynch said. You got to take care of your chicken.
Take care of your chicken. Take care of your mentals. Yeah. I would imagine that the way to approach this is marginal wins. How many additional wins can you create? Getting up to average improves in any particular category or unit, gets you to do a lot, especially in categories where you have a weak link type position. So cornerback or secondary in general, offensive line, those are weak link positions where your weakest link will probably determine the overall performance of the unit because teams will target that weak link. So removing weak links and getting up to average is going to do a lot for you. So if that is a weakness, you're going to increase your marginal wins by a little bit more there. But because it is wins above replacement and not just pure total talent, right? This is the concept originally stolen from baseball sabermetricians. Improving a strength puts you that much further ahead of your competition, whereas improving a weakness doesn't. So there's a bunch of analytical thresholds that you can cross to justify either one of these. And I would say that it is less about offense versus defense and more about unit versus unit. And I think that making the type of investments that get you to a top 3 offensive line, which I admire all of those teams. I think they're the Packers, the Browns, and the Bucks, right? Which, I mean, they seem to have done well. I mean, they all made it in the playoffs, right? And they all won a game in the playoffs, right? So that's not bad. But they also, except for I guess the Browns, but they all have top tier quarterbacks. That doesn't hurt either. But I think that for the most part, making those types of investments in the offensive line doesn't get you as far. But I think having a critically bad offensive line is going to doom you. And so you want to prevent doom, which I feel like is not a bad heuristic for life. Prevent doom. So you do that. That requires investments in particular units. Nickel corner, offensive guard. It doesn't require major investments, but it does require investments in particular units. Then you can go about seeking your advantages and maximizing them, because as soon as you get above replacement, everything there is pure profit, essentially. And so, should the Vikings invest in a receiver? I would think that that's not a bad idea. In fact, I'm going to be writing a piece about the costs and benefits of investing in particular positions in this year's draft. So if they invest in Jalen Waddle, you would obviously need an offensive coordinator that's willing to go 3 wide a lot more, which is going to be easier if they get rid of Kyle Rudolph. But if you invest in a defensive tackle like Christian Barmore, I think his first name is Christian, now you've shored up a weak link position, kind of. I mean, they're pressure producers as well, not just run defenders. But now you've shored up a position that was significantly below replacement level, and now you move yourself back up. And so now you're at a position where you're potentially, hopefully, breaking even, and you're potentially maximizing, Danielle Hunter and Michael Pierce, right? Which now you can consider as potentially a strength. So if you can move a weakness into a strength, that's not a bad place to be at all. But I think it's position by position. So yeah, and I think another way to view this is the opposite way. Who can we afford to get rid of? And I think that linebacker is neither really a weak link or a creation position, which is why it seems to be a little bit less valuable. Now, obviously, the impact that Eric Kendricks had on the defense seemed to be pretty substantial, but I would argue that Anthony Barr does not have that same impact. I think he's a lot better than a lot of people say. I think that people overreact to how bad he seems to be. I think he's actually a very good linebacker. I just don't think he's worth $15 million. But if you can trade him away, I think that the loss there is less substantial by kind of these same metrics, by the same kind of analytical viewpoints in terms of where are you going to get marginal wins above replacement. I don't think Eric Wilson's a good linebacker. I think his coverage is really good. I think that his run defense is just abysmal. I don't think that, Troy Dye or Todd Davis are great linebackers. Maybe Cameron Smith, he's coming back from the heart surgery. Maybe he's fine. But you'll be okay there. And maybe you'll invest in more linebackers and have more competition there. And that allows you to get assets somewhere else, like at wide receiver, where I think you're adding a couple of marginal points by adding a guy, or, on the defensive line where you're preventing a couple of points by adding a guy. So I don't know that it should be improve on strengths or focus on strengths and ignore weaknesses, or the other way around. I think it's you do it unit by unit, and you take a look at what's going to improve your marginal wins by the most. And I think that given the catastrophic state of the defensive line, which again will be improved with the return of Hunter and Pierce, I think that you can make a lot of headway by investing in somebody who is not a bottom 3 defensive tackle. If you take a look at pressure rate among defensive tackles over the past 2 years combined, and Jaleel Johnson and Shamar Stephen are like 2 of the bottom 3 defensive tackles. They are abysmal in terms of pressure production. And I think you move on from them to a below average defensive tackle, you've made a massive improvement. Whereas, and I don't like Chad Beebe, obviously, I think I've made that clear. You take a really good receiver like, say, CeeDee Lamb, who is a slot-only receiver for the Cowboys this year, really phenomenal. Assuming they had Dak all year, he would have been able to push Justin Jefferson in terms of yardage. I don't think he would have gotten past him because Jefferson set a friggin' record, but he would have been able to push him, right? That's really great. I think the difference between him and Chad Beebe is pretty significant, but I think in the offense, because he's the third, I guess he's not the third, he's really the second, but because he is a third addition, pushing Michael Gallup to third, that is a smaller gain than if you replace, if Chad Beebe was the second receiver and you replace him with Justin Jefferson or CeeDee Lamb or something like that. So, I mean, roster construction is difficult. It's not easy to just say it's, this one thing or the other thing.
I just want to point out that I'm not going to be naming the episode 1 Million Vibes there.
Why not?
I saw the edit to the show notes, and I'm not signing off on that yet.
But it's the best combination of the two things the episode's about: reaching 1 million and vibes.
Yeah, I'm much more inclined to have it be about preventing doom, but we'll see about that. Also from Raul. Miami defensive end Gregory Rousseau is often mocked to Minnesota. This reminds me of the Anthony Barr pick, a productive athletic neophyte edge. Is this the perfect pick to ignite a Zimmerian? Yeah, let's go with Zimmerian renaissance. Obviously.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's the perfect pick to ignite a Zimmerian renaissance for a couple of reasons. One, the reason Anthony Barr was such an interesting pick is because of the unique ways the Vikings used him and his athleticism. Obviously, when he got hurt, that changed things, but the Vikings essentially crafted a defensive look that became popular throughout the NFL and was really phenomenal for a couple of years, obviously, especially in 2017, but but Barr's big year was 2016. Or was it? Yeah, it was 2015, I think. But the point of Anthony Barr was that he could do everything, and he lined up in the A gap, and he didn't have to actually rush the passer all that much because when he dropped back in coverage, he was fast enough to get where he needed to go. Plus, the most common response at the time to that kind of look was to throw a screen, and Barr was fast enough to shut down screens. So that was the point of Anthony Barr. The fact that he was an edge rusher was kind of irrelevant. Like, they just wanted an athlete that they could trade at linebacker. They put him through coverage drills at his pro day, and he aced those coverage drills. So fantastic. Gregory Rousseau does not strike me as that kind of guy. I talked to a couple of people who specialize in edge evaluation, and they don't really like him that much. And this is like multiple people. Obviously, the other scouts, like Dan Brugler, for example, really likes him, and scouts in the league seem to like him. So there's that. But he's kind of a 6-game wonder, right? Because he didn't play this year. He opted out, which fine. And he didn't play his first year in college because he was redshirting, and so his opportunity to play came last year, and it was kind of his only opportunity to play. He got injured that first year, so he has 1 year of play, and he didn't start until the 6th game. So, and he was really productive in the first 5 games of the season for Miami, but we don't have a huge sample of his snaps. He lined up on the inside a lot. It's so difficult to find snaps for him that tell us a lot about the kind of athlete he is. And so I would think that this is actually not that similar to Anthony Barr. And in fact, because he lined up on the inside so often, he could potentially be kind of like Scott Crichton, except obviously Scott Crichton was a 3rd-round pick. Scott Crichton played nose tackle for an entire game. A lot of people talked about that. I think against Oregon, right? Because he's an Oregon State guy. Maybe it's the other way around. I'll look that up because somebody's going to be mad that I got that wrong. But he lined up he's an Oregon State guy. He played against Oregon at nose tackle, but he mostly played on the edge. But he was a super tester. He was a guy that passed most people's metrics, including Justice Mosqueda's edge rusher metric. For edge rushers, he was kind of productive. He wasn't like unproductive, but he wasn't, explosively productive. Gregory Rousseau's production was fine last year. It was a 16% pressure rate. That wasn't the top of the FBS, but it was in the top 15 of draft valuable prospects. That's pretty good. And his soft skills or his technical skills just don't seem to be there. I don't think, and so Anthony Barr, obviously, his technical skills weren't there, but he also led the nation in tackles for loss, I think, as an edge rusher. So it's not as if, he was middlingly productive, right? Like Gregory Rousseau, and I found that tackles for loss actually does matter a lot in terms of projecting, these position switches. So for somebody switching specifically from edge to linebacker, I found that, being I guess he didn't lead the league, but over 2 years, he had 41.5, which I think over that 2-year span was more tackles for loss than anybody. But yeah, so it's not as if Rousseau has a lot of the same qualities, either metrically or, he's also too big to switch positions. He's 6'7", either metrically or anything else. He was productive, but his 16% pressure rate is not all that great. 19.5 tackles for loss is pretty similar to Anthony Barr's tackle for loss production, so there's something there. But, for the most part, I would say that based off of the people I'm talking to, it does not seem as if Gregory Rousseau is the kind of athlete or the kind of player that Anthony Barr was. That said, he's getting mocked a lot to Minnesota, so it certainly seems like something Minnesota could do just because a lot of people see that as a potential fit. It would make a lot of sense to have another edge rusher next to Daniel Hunter. I'm not saying that Rousseau is bad or anything like that. I'm saying that a couple of people that I respect don't really like him as a prospect, so they could be right. But I'm also saying I don't really think he's a candidate for a position switch. Now, the tackle for loss thing, I thought it was less than that. So, maybe he is a better fit than I thought, but I don't know that he necessarily has the kind of skills that translate to a position switch. I think he's just going to be a pure edge rusher in the NFL, especially at 6'7". I don't think you want that guy playing linebacker. So yeah, I don't think he's the kind of pick that would ignite a renaissance.
Stezo asks, why do Vikings offensive coordinators keep getting head coaching opportunities, but Seahawks offensive coordinators seem to not get the same? Both head coaches are defensive guys, and the teams have been successful. Is this because Russ's play is not seen as repeatable somewhere else? If so, the Seahawks look to, or should the Seahawks look to emulate the QB hack system?
It'd be funny if they did. No, I think the Seahawks
all of this running on first down.
Right. I think the Seahawks system is fine. I think they should be comfortable throwing more. I don't think the issue with the Seahawks in the second half of the season was that they threw too much. There's a quote from Tyler Lockett that came out. I think Michael Sean Dugar reported it, that teams were spinning down into one high looks, or spinning up into two high looks instead of one high looks, because they would usually go one high because they would run so often. And so they started taking away the deep ball, and that's what hurt the Seahawks. But I think you take a look at the metrics and you take a look at how the Seahawks performed against two high looks versus one high looks this year. That doesn't really bear out. It's really Russ was worse in every element of play, and so it was really. I don't think it's because teams didn't respect the run, and I think that the number of people in the box for Seattle, again, you take a look at those metrics, was very similar. If you looked at how many people Seattle put in the box. So that had very little to do with the run frequency. So once you accounted for that, it didn't look like that was the issue. No, I think it's because those offensive coordinators are seen as holding the offense back. And so though the offense is pretty good, it's not as good as it could be, and it's not exciting, and it doesn't seem like that is something that you'd want to hire somebody for. Like, turning Jared Goff into an offensive weapon, that's interesting. Wow. Also, you're doing some stuff that seems to be at the innovation of football. I mean, I guess they don't motion a ton, but they motion. Obviously, they play action a ton. They use all these concepts that have beaten a bunch of, defensive, gurus and stuff like that. That's pretty great. Let's hire a bunch of McVay guys. Sometimes that works out. I mean, look at the Packers. Sometimes it doesn't. I guess look at the Bengals. We'll see how that works out. But maybe it doesn't work out sometimes. But the Seahawks aren't doing anything new or interesting or groundbreaking. Plus, it's like a lot of these offensive coordinators are like known quantities, like Darrell Bevel and the guy that just got fired, Brian Schottenheimer. Yeah. So I don't think that that's it. I just think that the Vikings, they look like when the offense is going well, it looks like somebody is doing something to make that happen, and are not quantities kind of known to be kind of whatever, right? Like Stefanski was not known to be mediocre, right? And it looked like he did a lot for the Vikings to make them a lot more successful, and the Browns are benefiting from that. And then Shermer, I mean, he did that with Case friggin' Keenum. I can see why he got hired. Yeah, the Russ stuff not being repeatable is part of it, but I also think that like it doesn't seem like the Seahawks offense is adding anything on top of what Russ does.
Next question is from Matt Beckendorf, who asks, would you rather have Stefanski and Payton or Zimmer and Spielman?
I guess Stefanski and Payton, but I wouldn't have said that last year, right? Like, new information, new answer. Stefanski is currently the leading candidate for head coach of the year. I'd want that guy. And obviously you have to weigh that against the fact that Zimmer has a track record, whereas Stefanski doesn't. He could just as easily fall off. People have made it to the playoffs and then have never done it again. People have had a really good first season and never done it again. Chip Kelly comes to mind. And so the sample size does matter here. And I've strongly defended Zimmer as a coach. I can no longer call him a 600 coach, nor can I call him the fifth best coach in terms of win percentage among active coaches, but he's like seventh or eighth, and up above him is Mike McCarthy, who doesn't count. So there's all that. But Stefanski seems to be a really great coach, and he seems to be able to attract really great assistants, which is really important. So I'd rather have him. And then I don't know what the difference between Payton and Spielman is. I'm going to call that a wash.
Next question is from Ryan, who asks, is it the most Vikings fan thing to do to pick another underdog team so you can have some disappointment in the playoff season?
I mean, yes, but I I just feel like people are attracted to underdog stories a lot, right? Like people want to see the Bills and the Browns do well, right? Like
There's
like unless like you're mad at like a specific interaction you had with like the Bills or the Browns fan base, in which case that's different. But like in a vacuum, just seeing a downtrodden team finally make its way, that's an exciting story.
It certainly is, and as the deleted scene from an episode of Parks and Rec goes to show, everybody loves a good comeback story. So yeah, it's difficult to kind of figure out there as to why, like it's good. At that point, it's a good thing to be cheering for the Browns in the playoffs. Like I actually had missed the game on Sunday. I watched it Monday morning. I had avoided all spoilers on social media and TV and the news and everything, and I was watching it early morning on Monday, and it hadn't been spoiled for me yet. And I'm sitting there just going like, the Browns could really do this. I'm just like,
close.
Yeah. It was it and good on them for what they were able to accomplish and everything this year. That is a huge thing for the Browns to make the playoffs, considering how bad they have been historically over the years. So
yeah, and they nearly took the defending champions to the brink. So yeah, they'll get some players back from injury on defense. So we'll see. But yeah, man, the Browns hadn't won a playoff game in 25 years. 25 years. The coach who does that gets a lot of leeway, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, they made a couple of there were a couple of head coach mistakes in that game, right? There was a couple of just absolutely confusing, puzzling challenge and timeout decisions that weren't great, but like coach brought them to a playoff win.
Yeah, so it is hard to argue that. Let's go on to the next question, which is from the Real HG, who asks, I kind of want the Vikings to promote Clint Kubiak. Is that a good idea? And do we have any evidence to suggest that he would be any good?
We don't have any evidence to suggest that he'll be any good. We don't have any evidence to suggest that he'll be bad. Is this a good idea? I don't know. I really wish I had like better answers for these kinds of questions, because at this point in the off season, this is kind of the primary question I have to answer in pieces, articles, podcasts, etc. And I don't really have a lot of data to go off of. And I'd rather just say, honestly, there's no way I can know the answer to this, rather than say, oh yeah, I think he'll be good because of like chemistry or whatever, or that he's been groomed to the position, or that he's grown up around football all his life. Because we know all kinds of coaches that have done that and have then been bad.
Yeah, it turns out the vibes on them have been totally wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we were just reading the vibes incorrectly. The vibes are always there. I mean, the vibes are never wrong, but the reading the vibe seems to be a skill that only a couple of people have. And so I haven't gotten the vibe read on Clint Kubiak. I haven't talked to him a lot. Maybe that's it. But because I remember the couple of conversations I had with Stefanski, I came away really impressed. Obviously, that means that I was reading the vibes really well. So
I am going to hit you with my car.
You brought up. I didn't bring up vibes at all. You brought up vibes.
Mm-hmm. Beef Brewski asks, there is a lot of speculation around what the salary cap will be next year. How much of a crunch will the Vikings face, and who do you think is likely to get cut or traded or restructured? Maybe we can just focus on the crunch of the cap, because the Vikings are going to be in real rough shape, and as we had covered before, the Saints could potentially just be sold off like in a bankruptcy sale.
Right? Yeah. So the projected cap by over the cap is $176 million. John Lynch, the 49ers GM, indicated that they're working with the way that they're planning their offseason. They're working as if the cap is $175 million. So my guess is that's what the case is going to be. In that scenario, the Vikings are, in terms of total cap liabilities, in terms of top 51 cap liabilities, 11.6 over cap. So previously it was reported that they were 8 million over cap. I think just a couple of things have moved around who's in the top 51. And so now they're, I guess, 11.6 million over cap. so who gets moved for that? So there are some positions where it feels like there's some free money that you can free up that I would not be all that interested in experimenting with. So Britton Colquitt and Dan Bailey combined are about $3.5 million in cap. So if you cut them, combined they actually are $7 million in cap. But if you cut them, you free up $3.5 million. I am not crazy interested in that prospect, just because even though Dan Bailey kind of messed up over the final couple of games of the year, I just generally expect veteran kickers to be able to hit their season long form, something he has done before. But when you're 11 over, that's a consideration you have to make. I don't really think the Vikings are really great at drafting those positions, but we'll see. So other players that you can cut and save cap. I don't think that Riley Reif is one of them because of the changed deal to accommodate, I think, Yannick Ngakoue has guaranteed him future money, which means that a cut for Riley Reif only saves $2.2 million, so he can only be traded. We've already discussed that the Texans are probably not a trade destination for him. And you'd have to maybe make the trade at an interesting time. I don't really know how that works, but I think you can trade to change, who gets what money and who's liable for which money. So there's that. Beyond that, Anthony Barr could potentially be traded. If you trade him, I think that frees up about $8 million, I want to say. If you restructure Adam Thielen, you could save, $5-6 million against the cap. You do have to worry about Danielle Hunter wanting a new deal. If you do strike a new deal with Danielle Hunter, you probably make sure that cap hit comes in 2023, 2024, and 2025. So you might be able to free up some space there. I see Kyle Rudolph potentially moving. A trade, if he gets traded, that frees up about $4.5 million. Again, his deal has some guaranteed money in it, so it's really difficult to just completely free up that space. And then, I don't know, Shamar Stephen could be cut. That's about another $1.5 million. There's not a ton of money to play around with after that. We're looking to save $11 million, and a lot of these guys are just guaranteed. And so you can save $7.5 million by trading or cutting Anthony Barr, or $8 million or so. You can save some money by restructuring Danielle Hunter and offering them a completely new deal. You can save $4 million here with Kyle Rudolph, and you might be forced to just say bye to Dan Bailey and Britton Colquitt just because of how difficult it is to cut everybody else. Jeff Gladney is the most cuttable contract you have, which obviously they're not going to do that. So yeah, I don't know who else you can if you cut a bunch of these mid roster guys, you'll gut your depth without getting that much back in terms of pay.
Yeah, but just about every team in the league is going to be looking at some version of that.
Yeah, potentially. There's actually a lot of cap space to be had, even with $176 million. So, for example, the Jaguars have $70 million in effective cap space in a $175 million environment.
The Jaguars have no players. That was
they'll drive up prices. Maybe you could trade Kyle Rudolph to the Jaguars.
The Jaguars have no assets. The Jaguars have no players. The Jaguars spent the last 3 years.
You're not getting players back. You're getting picks back.
Yeah, they haven't been doing anything with those either. They just...
You get to use the picks when you trade them away. I genuinely don't understand what's confusing about this. You trade someone to the Jaguars.
Uh-huh.
They take up the cap space. You get their picks.
Yeah, but it hasn't been going like that. It's just been the Jaguars trading their players and being like, "Oh, we got a couple picks." Who's the worst person we could select for this? Can we get a punter? Can we get a punter in the 4th round?
The Jaguars will make a bad selection, but if you have their pick, you won't make a bad selection. Well, maybe. But you won't draft a punter immediately before Russell Wilson.
There's what you mentioned cap space. I was like, oh yeah, well the Jags have a ton of cap space. Yeah, I bet the Jets do too.
They're second in cap space.
Yeah, as it turns out.
Yeah, but guess who's third in cap space?
Oh God, is it gonna be something like the Giants or something?
No, it's a great team.
A great team.
Good team.
All right, so you're fond of Seattle. What's their cap space?
$2 million. They are not third.
They are not third. Who is third?
The Colts.
Actually, that doesn't surprise me.
It doesn't?
No, because there was talk about how if Rivers goes away this year, that they're actually in really good position to be able to pick up another veteran quarterback, thinking that that's the one piece that they need.
Yeah, well, they are. They also only signed Xavier Rhodes to a 1-year contract. Which, I mean, I guess he's hitting the free market again, new and improved. But I mean, $65 million, they can re-sign Rivers and Rhodes, no problem, and still have like $20 million left over.
Does Xavier Rhodes trip on the way in to sign his contract? Have to stop for a moment, kind of walk it off, and then go over, stand up, and then go over to the table in order to sign? Oh
yeah, Xavier Rhodes had a fantastic year last year.
Oh, he did. And whenever it was game day, you'd always see tweets of people going, Xavier Rhodes went down again for a 6-play injury again.
But that's because it was very easy to retweet those tweets.
Well,
we were selecting for Xavier Rhodes getting injured tweets.
It happened.
He played 900 snaps. He played 16 games, 900 snaps last year.
How many of them did he walk away from and have to go to the blue tent for 6 plays?
I don't know, but I think it's just...
I think it's abnormally high.
A Vikings beat writer, including me, I would retweet it. A Vikings beat writer would retweet it. And so Vikings fans were overexposed to the number of times Xavier Rhodes missed a play or two. So if you see it 3 times in a season, you're like, well, I don't get much Colts news, so this must be happening all the time. He had more snaps than Jair Alexander did this year, than Kendall Fuller, than Darius Slay, than Tre'Davious White, than Marshawn Lattimore, than Jalen Johnson.
I'm sure he limped to the sidelines more often than all of these guys put together as well.
I don't know that. You don't know how many times is a Vikings beat writer gonna tweet that Tre'Davious White got injured for 2 plays?
This actually might be worth a deep dive. Just because we were curious. I'm fine. I might be out of my element here. Fine. An unpronounced
great year, and he might get to sign another great contract.
Yeah. An unpronounceable symbol on Twitter, which is not his handle, it just actually is an unpronounceable symbol, asks, who are some budget guards we can sign after the big dogs like Thuney and Scherf are off the board?
I'm going to be doing a deeper offseason dive into what a Vikings offseason plan could look like. But I did identify kind of what a blueprint for that would be, and I identified 2 interior offensive linemen that would be in that budget category. So there's David Andrews, who didn't play in 2019 because of a blood clot, returned this year and had a legitimately very good season. I actually voted for him for comeback player of the year because I could not stand to give it to Ben Roethlisberger, nor did I think that Alex Smith played well enough. And so I'm probably the only person on the PFWA ballot that voted for David Andrews. But that's what I did. He actually had a pretty good year. And then John Feliciano on the interior as well. I believe he used to play for the Bills. I think then he played for another team after that. I think the Raiders or something like that. So he's currently his most recent contract was with the Bills. But he played with the Raiders from 2015 to 2018. He is a budget reasonable guard. He's a little bit bigger, right, than the Vikings' usual guard. He's about 320 pounds. But his movement skills are not that bad. I just think that even though he's not really a zone fit, I just think that he's good, right? Which the Vikings just don't have. So I'm just just do it, right? Just get a guy. I'm getting frustrated, but he doesn't fit any of the Vikings kind of athletic metrics, but he's a little bit better than what they have. But David Andrews does, and they can both play center or guard. And so they've got that versatility. But those are 2 names that I just kind of briefly tossed out there. Later on, I'll put down kind of a more concrete list of the potential cheap options that they have. But yeah, I mean, the Vikings are going to have to kind of pinch pennies at some positions, and I think guard is one of the positions that they have to do that.
Next question is from Josh, who asks, will there be a reunion between the Vikings and Everson Griffin? In his end-of-year presser, Zimmer expresses a desire for more of a pass rush and prefers vets who know his system. The interest is certainly there on Everson's side if his social media is anything to go by. For those who missed it, Everson Griffen spent the better part of a week and a half to 2 weeks courting the Minnesota Vikings over Instagram.
Yeah, and a little bit on Twitter.
And a little bit on Twitter.
And recording them, yes.
Yes, to the point where he was making some statements about Kirk Cousins as well as to whether or not Zimmer actually wanted Kirk Cousins. And apparently he decided that was the one step too far and decided to step back. You're like, oh.
I mean, that was a step too far.
Yeah.
It was pretty weird. He took posted on my Instagram stories of him just driving by the Vikings facility. He liked some tweets about returning to the Vikings. I think he retweeted a tweet saying that he would like to return to the Vikings. And again, he posted some other stuff about the Vikings on Instagram as well, indicating that he wanted to return. A couple of days later, he posted at Vikings, so on Twitter, at Vikings, Kirk Cousins sucks ass. And then he added, on top of that, just ask if Zimmer wanted Kirk Cousins, which, obviously the implication is no. And then he apologized and said he shouldn't have said that, which I guess that's true. But I mean, this is all pretty uncomfortable territory given Everson Griffen's history. And so, the worry there, and then he even said that he was going to seek additional help from a mental health perspective. So it seems like he thinks that this might be related to his ongoing mental health issues, in which case, I don't want to treat this too callously, but I would imagine that the Vikings, kind of seeing that, wouldn't want to jump into any continued contractual relationship with Everson Griffen. That said, I wouldn't say that the Vikings would turn it down completely, but I think that, Griffen posting that might have been the last straw, because I don't think that you can post something, whether or not you've been in and out of your health. I don't think you can post that, hey, the head coach didn't really want the quarterback, and get to keep your job. So unless you're like a JJ Watt kind of guy, right? I think that it is somewhat unlikely. But I think that the priority in terms of conversations about Everson Griffen is, I hope he finds the help that he needs. I don't know that traveling to other cities or other states to play football, necessarily helped with that. But, I don't know. Maybe he made arrangements in Dallas and Detroit, and this was just a lapse. I have no idea.
What I had read before was that he still has a residence in Minnesota, so it wouldn't have been it wouldn't have been that weird for him to actually be in the Minneapolis area. And if you live near Eagan, you can drive by.
I don't think he was the Vikings. I think he was just driving by the facility, right? Yeah,
exactly. This sort of thing just kind of happens. So it wouldn't have been that out of the ordinary for him to be in Minnesota. That said, things went a bit too far. Alexander asks, if we keep Riley Reef at left tackle, where do you see Ezra Cleveland playing? Staying at right guard or moving to the left side?
Given how difficult it seems to be to move Riley Reef's contract, there's a good possibility that he stays at left tackle. I would say, I would see Ezra Cleveland playing left guard probably, because they might want to train him to play on the left side in order to prepare him for a future at left tackle. If they play him at right guard, that might be a soft indication. I wouldn't read too much into it. A soft indication that they are considering moving Brian O'Neill to left tackle and then Ezra Cleveland to right tackle. But man, I don't really see Cleveland as a guard. He just doesn't seem to be very good at it. So I think his future is at tackle. Who knows?
Corey asks, thoughts on this scenario? I'm officially unallowed to watch Bills games from my good friends who claim every time I've watched the Bills, they have lost. Should I continue to hopefully curse the Packers/Brady in the Super Bowl? And why is this ultimately Anthony Barr's fault?
Because he got hurdled by Josh Allen. So you've been cursed every time from then on that when you watch the Bills that they lose. It's kind of like a karmic retribution in your favor. But it turns into this weird perversion where now there's a situation where you actually want them to win, and they may not because of the curse that you've invoked. So if Anthony Barr had never been hurdled by Josh Allen, none of this would have happened. I would say that you should continue to kind of curse the Packers and or Tom Brady in the Super Bowl by not watching the Super Bowl if the Bills make it. That seems totally rational and something that you would definitely do if a podcast host told you to do it.
Yes, and also please throw out that cursed amulet. Why do you still have that?
Yeah, that's weird, dude.
Dude, it smokes in the middle of the night. Just throw it out. Adam Bryant asks, for Reef and James's birthday corner. It's my birthday today. Happy birthday, Adam. Yes, it's his birthday corner. Adam's awesome. Which Viking would I have, or would I want to have bake my cake? Clarification, past or present.
So it seems like Dalvin Cook actually does cook. So that's an option in terms of present. I don't know how good he is at baking. Those are two different skill sets in my experience. So it's not quite the same, but I'd rather have somebody with some cooking experience than none. But yeah, Dalvin Cook is an option. He also has a handy chef's toque, I guess is what I'm supposed to call that. Dusty got mad at me for calling it a chef. It's a chef's hat. I don't care about Dusty. It's a chef's hat.
When he potentially comes back for the Super Bowl prop episode, I'll make sure that.
Yeah.
I'll make sure that that he knows that you don't care about his opinions.
Yeah.
Actually, he already knows that. So
because he specifically recommended one.
Well, yes.
I mean, we just got another French press, so it seems that we're operationalizing this distaste. As for past Vikings, underrated selection is Asami Fashion, who told me that if he wasn't playing football, he'd be opening a restaurant, and then seemed to earnestly attempt to do that afterwards. He was a former defensive tackle for the Vikings that they ended up switching to guard at one point. Obviously, it didn't end up working out, but he seemed to be quite good at cooking. He was making his. I don't know how far that restaurant dream went. I imagine that had it gone any further, it might have gotten a hiccup because of 2020. But it seemed to be something that he was really passionate about. So that's something. James has a really good historical Viking that I actually can't beat. So I'll let James go.
I think the historical Viking that you choose is Jared Allen. I think that he just shows up with a Carvel cake. Maybe he doesn't bake it, but he definitely shows. Yeah, he just shows up with a Carvel cake. Maybe it's not even your birthday, and he just shows up at your door with a Carvel cake, and you're like, "All right, Jared Allen, let's do this. Let's sit down and let's figure this out." And yeah, at that point, it's really just a question of whether of just how insane your birthday goes. Because you can't go the Adrian Peterson route because that involves camels. And Adrian Peterson, by most accounts, is now broke. So you can't go that route. So I think you go the Jared Allen route instead. Maybe you go out into the desert with Jared Allen and he does Russian ab training with the little people that he keeps around, according to the episode of, I want to say, Kenny Mayne Time.
Is it Main Street?
Maybe it was the thing that aired the week of the Pro Bowl that had Wes Welker in a fat suit and Jared Allen throwing a rock across America to raise awareness for other countries.
That show was so good. Oh, Main Event.
That's what it was. Main Event. Yeah. That's that really is one for the books. Yeah, that I think he referred to the Pro Bowl as America's Grey Cup.
That's an amazing take.
So, yeah. Kyle Slaby asks, this year's free agent and draft prep process might have similar issues to last year. Limited testing numbers, lack of in-person meetings, etc. In addition to a large crop of players who won't have 2020 tape to review. Should fans expect changes to draft strategy as a result?
Like from last year, given that last year seemed to be a surprise for NFL teams and so on. I actually don't think so. I think that for the most part, um, we'll see essentially similar strategies to the adaptations that teams took this year. So I think that they'll have like a like tape from pro days that they'll use and trust essentially. And that is what inspired them to draft Cameron Dancer. So I think they'll feel validated in that process. I think that they'll use the 29. I mean, the Vikings very often use college tape from previous years as part of their evaluation. Like there's a big reason that they were interested in both Stephon Diggs and Laquan Treadwell. One of those did not work out. And I think that this is something, and it was also a big reason about with the Justin Jefferson pick as well. So this is something that they're comfortable doing. A lot of teams are. And so if they have a bunch of 2019 tape on a player, that's something they'll be interested in. I think that the relationships that they've built up over the years with the college coaches are going to play a pretty important role like they did last year. And so I think that for the most part, it's not going to be a huge adjustment. I think that for some positions, it might be tough. Like, for example, it might be a reason that they would not be interested in somebody like a quarterback, especially, what quarterback only had one game this year is the NDSU guy, Trey Lance. I think he only had one game this year. They might be less confident in that prediction, in which case they might not be willing to pull the trigger if they were actually interested in a quarterback. But for positions where they feel comfortable kind of projecting traits, say like linebacker or cornerback, I think that they'll kind of just trust the process that they already have. So I don't think that there's going to be a huge change in what they do. Maybe they'll place more emphasis on the Senior Bowl, which is being held this year. I won't be going, but I'll be getting all the tape over like email. So they didn't actually tell me how I was getting it.
I was going to say, this is the best your audio has ever sounded from the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, right. Yeah. This is Reef live from the Senior Bowl in Minneapolis.
Yes, this is not necessarily the sound coming from your Alabama hotel room or bar. I think we did the hotel bar or lobby one year.
Yeah, we did. Really great stuff. Just amazing content.
1 million listens, everybody.
Yeah, I don't think the draft strategy will change too much. They'll still get numbers from pro days, and I actually think we'll get essentially much more data than we'll have last year because of those pro days, because they're going to hold the pro days this time, even though like the disease is more now than it was then.
You could argue, yeah. Nick Howard asks, if you could talk to any member of the Vikings organization, past or present, who would it be and what would you talk about? And my caveat for this is not Alan Page.
Yeah, which, fair enough. Also, I have talked to Alan Page a number of times for like over an hour. One of my most cherished conversations or sets of conversations ever. There's like a 10-minute gap in the audio that just got ruined by the wind. I'm so angry about it. But I like transcribed the whole thing. Also, Lindsay Young helped me transcribe it because it was so long. So shout out to her. Thank you. But besides Alan Page, who's a personal hero of mine, I mean, so in terms of present, it would probably just be Rick Spielman, with the presupposition. And I think obviously the question requires that they kind of just tell you, you just have a normal conversation and they're not so secretive about stuff. So it'd be about Rick Spielman, because I just want to know how everything works so I can better answer questions and stuff like that. But also I'm just like curious. I mean, the whole reason I have this job is because I'm endlessly curious about football, right? I'm always attempting to learn more about the thing, and then I write about it, right? Or I podcast about it if it's not good enough to be written. So that's what you're getting. That's 1 million views is my leftovers. But yeah, I mean, that is fundamentally what I'm curious about. It also would help me be better at my job, obviously. I also would not hate, the Zimmer side of that either. But I think that, that feels like a waste, right? Of like your one shot to talk at anybody who's been a member of the Vikings organization. And I don't want like that cup of coffee. Like, I think Brett Favre is just like a cop out, right? He's only been here 1 year. it's someone significant to the history of the organization in some way. I mean, Randy Moss would be just a ton of fun. I would talk about literally anything. I would talk about what kind of food he likes, whether or not he's changed his opinion on dog food.
I like how you and I hadn't talked about this question, and that was going to be one of my potential answers to ask if he's changed his opinion on the taste of dog food. We have been doing this for too long.
We have been. But yeah, I'd ask him about, growing up, I was in the DMV, right? The Maryland, Virginia area.
Yes.
I'd ask him about just playing wide receiver in general. I mean, I ask him all kinds of stuff, right? But I kind of want to know his outlook on life, what his reaction was to even just kind of recent stuff, like when I forget who what. Oh, it was Booger, who isolated Black athletes for being too focused on social media, which I thought was an awful take. He was in the room and he didn't push back, and I wanted to know what his instant reaction was and how his reaction has evolved. Just everything, right? What it's like, what's different about working in the media now, how his views on the media have evolved, whether or not he felt it was appropriate for him to distrust the media given his history of the media mischaracterizing him from his high school and college days, just everything. I think that he's got one of the most fascinating stories, and I think that it gets overshadowed by how good he is, or good he was, right? Which is just like a weird thing to say. Like, yeah, one of the best wide receivers of all time, if not the best wide receiver of all time, is overshadowed in terms of his story by the fact that he's the greatest wide receiver of all time, right? Like, that's weird, but it's true. He's got an interesting story, which is why I'm really glad that Bomani Jones's documentary, was it just called Rand You?
Yes.
I forget what it was called. Didn't focus at all on his NFL playing career. And I thought that was a great choice because that's been covered really well. So that's somebody to talk to. I'd love to talk to Jim Marshall about kind of his life, his struggles, and just what he thinks about like the Hall of Fame process, how the game has evolved, etc. Not super interested in talking to Fran Tarkenton, honestly. Maybe Robert Smith, just about transitioning. Leaving the game early. I don't know. But I mean, there's a ton of names. Talking to Alan Page again would probably be better than talking to someone new, honestly. But, if we exclude him, I think Randy Moss is on the list. I think Rick Spielman's on the list. I think Mike Zimmer's on the list. And then, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people that would be interesting to talk to, so long as the condition is that they're just kind of forthright and honest with you.
And the Randy Moss thing I thought would be just interesting in general. There was a buddy of mine ran into Tommy Kramer at a bar in South Dakota, and was telling me about this conversation that he had with Tommy Kramer, which made me think, that could probably be an interesting conversation, or that'd be a pretty interesting person to just sit down with. Somebody who's just going to, just shoot from the hip like that. Tommy Kramer could be an interesting player for that sort of thing.
Did Randy Moss and Allen Iverson play at the same time in high school? Because Allen Iverson was nearly a quarterback. And he was a phenomenal high school quarterback.
Yeah.
And I want to know if Randy Moss thought that Allen Iverson could have been a professional quarterback, despite the fact that he's under like 6 feet tall.
Yeah. Allen Iverson being an incredible athlete and also being that tiny.
Yeah.
Would have been interesting. It would, like the Kyler Murray thing now.
Like Randy Moss and Allen Iverson walk up to you and you don't know who they are. And you're told that one of them is a wide receiver and one of them is a quarterback, you would have absolutely switched them.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, he's a slot guy and he's a traditional 6'4" quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea of someone that short playing quarterback in the league successfully at the time that he would have played would have, I'm not saying be unheard of, but it definitely would have been a rarity.
Yeah.
To be sure. Also from Nick Howard, question for Reef's parenting corner. My son is 3 and he's recently gotten to Marvel superheroes. Thinking about getting him a video game for our PS4. What game or games would be age appropriate for him? I think I gave you an answer for this.
You did, and I'm going to use it. But my first response was, he's 3. Like, what age appropriate games are there out there that I could actually know about and recommend? Are there even age appropriate Marvel games? Which was dumb. I should have realized that Disney would, of course, license Marvel games for every single age group. I just didn't know if they were necessarily available for the PS4. You told me that there was Lego Avengers available for the PS4. That sounds like a really great answer. I'm going to say I thought of it. So when you do get it and your son loves it, make sure that you mention me and explicitly don't mention James at all. Get him the onesie, though. Well, no, he's 3. He's too old for the one. Get him a small shirt.
Yeah, he can still do the romper. It's fine.
Yeah, actually, get the onesie, and then when he grows up, say that he wore it when he was young.
For Anton, or from Anton, rather, for James's Vikings corner, can we help the Seahawks sign Adam Gase? I think we, as a collective of listeners and fans,
vibes out there
should put that out there. It's a West Coast thing, we can put that out there into the ether. The Seahawks really do need to consider signing Adam Gase for, if no other reason, that we could use a good laugh.
I mean, yeah, that sounds hilarious.
Yeah, that
has Adam Gase done anything good?
That's an article. That's a non-clickbaity article. Christopher Wiley asks, who's a Reeves' extremely early man crush in this year's draft? Also, who would you name the man crush award after? Michael Thomas, Isaiah Wynn, Denzel Mims?
First, I would obviously name it after Michael Thomas. Why would I name it after like people that we don't know if they're going to be any good? I'm going to name it after the guy that I absolutely nailed. Isaiah Wynn is like fine. He seems to be fine. But we'll know more about Denzel Mims next year. But like in a stacked receiver class, Denzel Mims hasn't done anything. Obviously, most of that's because of injury. But it seems interesting that we've got all of these great receivers and Mims's name hasn't popped up yet. So who knows? We'll see. As for draft crushes that I have, obviously I can't pick somebody like Trevor Lawrence or Zach Wilson, people that are like consensus the top players. I have to pick a player that seems to be kind of underrated relative to what seems to be the consensus. And I have to say, I have not watched enough football this year, at least college football, to have a huge say. I would pick the Ohio State receiver, Chris Olave, but he has decided to go back, which is pretty unfortunate. He is a remarkable route runner. He's got pretty good market share. He doesn't have the same metrics that Denzel Mims had in terms of like breakout age and age-adjusted market share, but I tend to like the Ohio State receivers. I mean, I like KJ Hill a lot. Obviously, I like Michael Thomas a lot. I like Devin Smith a lot. Some of them haven't worked out, like, Devin Smith, but obviously one of them did. And so maybe I'm just kind of like locked in to that type. I think it's kind of boring to pick Rashad Bateman as my guy. I think he's going to be great, obviously. But everybody from Minnesota seems to think that he's going to be great. I like Rondale Moore a lot. So that could be somebody, but I'm taking a look at this list and nobody like pops out to me as a really great guy quite yet as a draft crush. I mean, Terrace Marshall, the LSU receiver that is not Jamar Chase, could be somebody that I could say is really underrated and really good. I don't know if that, could qualify. Let's see. I'm taking a look at this list of like top players in the draft, and I don't know that anybody has popped out as somebody that I would seem to like more than the consensus thus far. I think I just have to be kind of deeper into draft analysis before I can pick a guy. Like I didn't pick Michael Thomas until actually pretty late in the process because I was doing scouting reports on every single potential first round wide receiver, and Michael Thomas was like my 4th or 5th draft profile. And so I don't think I picked Michael Thomas until like March, maybe April. No, April would have been really late, but yeah, maybe April. But yeah, I was pretty late on selecting my draft crush then. I like Denzel Mims as a result of the Senior Bowl. So that was pretty close to now. But it wasn't really before then. So yeah, I don't know that I'm at a point where I can pick a guy. But obviously my early favorites, if we get to include Rashad Bateman, is Rashad Bateman, maybe Terrace Marshall. I want to watch him a little bit more. Rondale Moore I've liked a lot based off of what I've seen. I don't know who else. Also, I was really into Marcus Williams, the Saints safety. I would say that he was a draft crush of mine. But I don't know that anybody. I'm taking a look at this first round, and I don't know that anybody is popping out as somebody that I seem to be significantly higher. I'm taking a look at a mock draft right now that I'm significantly higher on than other people. I am going to be really interested in Rashawn Slater, who seems to be the second offensive lineman off the board for a lot of people. But it seems it's going to be difficult for me to say that is my draft crush if he's going to continue to be the consensus number 2. And I've seen some people even put him at number 1. So that's going to be pretty interesting. Otherwise, I don't know that I can get to a point where there's a guy that I really like right now.
Next question is from Andrew Shad, who asks, after Antoine Winfield Jr. spoiled their playoff hopes yet again and Breeze retiring off a brutal loss, I think I'm ready to put my Saints grudge to rest. After Beastquake, the Miracle, the Rams no call, Rudolph, and the Breeze implosion, we're good, right? I'm ready to put it into the ground. If not, please provide ammo to get me back worked up to the point where I can hate Sean Payton again. If you are finding yourself in a situation where you are questioning your hatred for Sean Payton.
Yeah, and Sean Payton specifically, like that dude seems to always act like his whole.
He does. There's nothing that Sean Payton does that even if he's doing something really nice, I still have to like raise an eyebrow. Like he's up to something.
All right. So there's a couple of things, right? So obviously, Sean Payton mocking the skull chant. I think that's a big part of it. Sean Payton whining to the league. I mean, he was right, but still whining to the league about changing the pass interference rules. That was part of it. I think the fact that it was precipitated off of a single event made it much more difficult to implement a fair version of that rule that actually would overturn actual pass interference. I think so. That's part of it. I think
he was dancing the gritty after the Vikings loss.
Yeah, all the time. Also, there's the Saints scandal with the Catholic Church, where the owner of the Saints was alleged to direct the Saints PR department to help the Catholic Church potentially conceal officials that were involved in sex abuse scandals. I'll link a story about that, so I don't want to libel myself on a podcast.
Well, we've talked about that a couple of times, so it is something that we've spoken of. But there's plenty of good reasons to be
like. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so that's part of it. That's pretty recent too. Like that was like last year. Oh my God, it was June 17th, 2020.
Sure was.
Oh, geez, that was
the Saints. The Saints are in my book anyway. The Saints have kind of found themselves in this situation until Sean Payton leaves. When Sean Payton goes, I may reevaluate the situation, but until then, it's kind of hard to forget all of the things that have kind of happened in association with Minnesota and the Vikings as far as the New Orleans Saints are concerned. So I think once Sean Payton goes, we'll talk. But until then, there's no reason to let up that Olympic-sized swimming pool of hate that you have just under the surface. Let it out.
Also, there is the hilarious allegation that the Saints hold their training camp in West Virginia specifically because Sean Payton has a mistress in West Virginia. That is so funny to me. This was revealed by Junior Galette. That's it. And he on Twitter revealed that the reason that the Saints hold a training camp in West Virginia of all places is because he has a mistress in West Virginia. That is pretty funny. Actually, I'm just going to go really quickly over everything that Galette seemed to allege.
Because that's kind of what we're doing here anyway.
Yeah. Marquez Colston, washed up, but a good dude. And Brandon Cooks can't carry the load. Again, this was in 2015. Sean Payton treated Drew Brees with kid gloves. He had at the time he had like turnover habits, but he consistently corrected players who made fewer mistakes. And Payton even blamed some of the team's losses on players parking in the coach's spots at times. He also said that Brees is still good, but he's losing arm strength, which nailed it back in 2015. Said that Teron Armstead has Hall of Fame talent. Kind of nailed that one too. Let's see. Apparently he and Cam Jordan hate each other. Julio Jones exposed Keenan Lewis in their one-on-one matchups and implied that Lewis is an ostrich looking. Okay, that's funny. Also said that Payton played favorites in giving Lewis. I wasn't going to say because, it's a family-friendly podcast. And also said that Payton played favorites, gave Lewis a raise when he pouted. Payton moved training camp to West Virginia so he could sleep with his mistress. Said Payton's a wannabe Bill Parcells, implied the players respect Rob Ryan more than Payton, despite Payton throwing Ryan under the bus in front of his players. Sean Payton, Junior Gillette continues to belittle former defensive leaders from the Super Bowl team, Will Smith, Jonathan Vilma, Scott Vegeta, Shani McRae. This is before Will Smith died. Said the Saints will manage to only win 3 games this season. That didn't turn out to be true. Got mad at a couple of Saints beat writers, including a current colleague of mine at The Athletic. And he kept on bragging that the Saints gave him a 1-year contract. So there's all kinds of stuff in here. But some of the stuff is like, yeah, Sean Payton kind of sucks.
And Sean Payton has gone on record as recently as like last summer as declaring that everything involving Bountygate was blown out of proportion and total BS. So
yeah, sure.
If you're looking for anything there, you've got all the ammo that you need. Sean Payton is not somebody that is particularly difficult to, dislike. Also with the cooking corner, I need more ways to use my sous vide. Love using it, but I'd always just seem to make steak. Thinking maybe barbecue. All ideas welcome. The floor is yours for sous vide.
Yeah, so actually one of my favorite things to do with sous vide is make eggs. So there's a couple of ways to do it. I think Chef Steph's even has like a little app that gives you like different times and temperatures to look at eggs. So I'll include that in the show notes. But I like something that is typically called a 64-degree egg, although that is not a super accurate, or rather, that is in Celsius. It's closer to 143 or something like that in Fahrenheit. Again, I'll just link the Chef Steps thing because I look it up every time I do it. But it creates this like unmatched texture for an egg. It ends up becoming essentially a poached egg that you do in the shell, and it is amazing for breakfast. Luke Inman has had it. I made it for him for breakfast once. My brother's had it. Chelsea's, of course, had it. And they all absolutely love it. So I think that is one of its best applications. In fact, restaurants have started using it or had started using it like 10 years ago as a way to prep their poached eggs instead of actually poaching the eggs, because they can just keep it in the water bath and not have to poach to order. They just break open the egg and put it on like whatever they're going to smother in hollandaise, right? Stuff that is difficult to cook, for example, octopus. I've had good octopus and I've had bad octopus. Bad octopus tends to just be really tough, easily overcooked. But good octopus is just insanely tender. Well, you can kind of perfect that with sous vide. So there's something that you can do there. I've had sous vide ribs, which you start sous vide and then you finish in the oven. That's obviously if you don't have access to a way to smoke it. So obviously up here in Minnesota during the winter, it's not going to be super easy to smoke. Although if you're like brave enough, you can do it. But you can kind of get around that by using a little bit of liquid smoke and finishing in the oven. I think it tastes really remarkable. The texture is unique. I don't think that you can exactly replicate smoking, but you can get a really fantastic texture. There's also a bunch of recipes at Serious Eats for sous vide. They've got one I want to try. I haven't tried it yet for glazed carrots. I think that if you can cook vegetables really well, that kind of sets you apart, because a lot of people practice cooking pork chops and steaks and stuff like that, and they get pretty good at it. But not a lot of people can make you like really surprised that you're eating really good vegetables and that you want to eat more of that. So I think that if you specialize in a couple of vegetables, you can really like wow a lot of people by saying, hey, here's a side that I want to eat. And Chelsea does that with this carrots recipe that she does. I bet you could do that with the sous vide carrot recipe in here that could surprise a lot of people. And then also something in here that I really want to try, and I save this for the last one because it's the most intriguing one. I have not done it yet, but I am fascinated. You make an apple pie. Obviously, you can't do it all in the sous vide, but what you do is that you sous vide the apples for the filling beforehand, and it activates the pectin in the apples. So really great apple pie, when you cut into it, the apples don't spill out, right? And part of the reason for that is because of the pectin and they're in a lot of fruits, but specifically in apples, that keeps its shape after you let it rest coming out of the oven. It's kind of this perfect slice that just doesn't spill out, which you'll see a lot at restaurants. Well, you can activate it without, and a lot of people will kind of overcook the apples. They get mushy, but you get the texture that you want from the pectin. Well, you can activate it without having to worry about overcooking it by cooking the filling in sous vide. So there's a really interesting texture combination. You can create they call it a super gooey apple pie. So I want to try that. That sounds really fascinating. Where you started off you start off the filling on a stove, and then you pop it in the oven real quick, and then you finish it in the sous vide. Then you put it back into the pie and put the pie on top of it, and then you only have to worry about cooking the outside. So you can even put it in at a higher temperature than you normally would, because you're only concerned with cooking the crust. So those are two things that I'm really excited about potentially doing with sous vide that I haven't done yet. I've also done 48-hour short ribs that in wine that were amazing. We had it at a restaurant, and we asked the waiter how they did it, and he just told us everything, which was great. The restaurant was Belena in Chicago. It's pretty pricey. Chelsea and I were there for a special occasion, so if you have an opportunity to eat there, I would highly recommend it. It's some of the best food I've ever had in my life. But we asked them how they did the short ribs, and so we replicated it at home. It wasn't nearly as good as the restaurant, but it also was the best short ribs I've ever made, and I've made them a lot. So it was just a 48-hour sous vide inside with red wine with short ribs. So a lot of stuff you could do sous vide. I'm going to link a lot of these recipes in the show notes.
All right, next question. Well, it's actually a couple of questions here from Ricardo. They're kind of rapid fire here. Better reason to cheer for the Bears. Hope that they sign Trubisky long term, or seeing Sean Payton sad. Obviously, this came before the game, and again, this is right back to the Sean Payton thing.
Yeah, there's all kinds of reasons to want Sean Payton sad. Just ask. I mean, you just throw this question out into the ether. Just ask any Vikings fans that you follow; they'll give you reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was obviously cheering against Trubisky because above everything else, above whether or not I dislike or like Drew Brees, dislike or like Tom Brady, dislike or like Sean Payton, I care about my takes. So I'm cheering for my takes, and I want Trubisky to play poorly, and he did. He played so poorly that he won the Nickelodeon Valuable Player Award. That's great. And the fact that they seemingly have committed to Trubisky for another season means that all we needed was for the Bears to make the playoffs. So done. We're good there.
Fantastic. Dumber thing I have done recently. Watch the Minnesota/Detroit game without the North Code watch along, or walking directly into a wall and gashing my face.
How do you walk in? There must have been something on the wall, right? Like, how do you walk into a wall?
Maybe you're on your phone, you're distracted, and it's early, and you walk into,
But how do you gash your face is really like when
maybe
you walk
there's a nail
wall.
sticking out, and you just, smack that.
Like
Or
you got to specify, Ricardo. This is very confusing.
yes, exactly.
No, but obviously it's not watching with us.
Yeah, that was a hell of a lot of fun. Better long-term investment for kiddos: North Code onesies or college fund?
Well, assuming it's the same amount going into either, obviously the onesies. I mean, those are collectible items that you can sell for later. That'll return you much more than a college degree would.
It says, and if you can trust Arif's opinion on anything, it's the value of college. Larger number, TDs by Trubisky in wild card game, or number of James's children. As it turns out, Trubisky only threw one.
The number of James's children, it is.
Yeah, as it turns out. More depressing thought: one more year of Zimmer or one more year of Spielman?
Why is that depressing? I think they're both good.
Well, it's Which one would be more depressing then, I suppose?
I guess one more year, Zimmer. I think Spielman's better, I suppose.
Smaller number, 2021 Viking draft picks or number of James's exes?
Incredible. Well, it's obviously the draft picks.
It is actually. More depressing experience, game of bingo with Don from Ohio or game of kicker horse with Dan Bailey?
Well, let's go back to the previous one real quick. Smaller number of Vikings 2021 draft picks or number of lamps gifted to James?
Well, that's different. The number
right,
of
don't go into that, because if you weren't there for the lamp story, you're never going to get it. All right. More depressing experience. Game of bingo with Don from Ohio or game of kicker horse with Dan Bailey? It's got to be the kicker horse, because either you're losing by a lot and that's sad, or you're winning and that's worse.
Yeah, I think winning a game of kicker horse against Dan Bailey is more of an indictment against Dan Bailey at that point.
Well, no, yeah, that's the reason that part's sad. But if you're losing, I mean, just inherently people don't want to lose. So there's that too.
Less useful, running on second and long or Dusty's opinion on coffee?
Okay, I did just say I don't care about Dusty's opinions at all. Absolutely, without qualifier. But, I mean, he's actually pretty smart when it comes to coffee. I just disagree about the one thing about him caring about specifically who wins the International Barista Competition and using their recipe and thinking that everybody places second to 10th has nothing of value to offer. That's ridiculous. It's insane.
Just tell him that you're using your French press on top of your Keurig. Like you're just using the Keurig as a stand.
Yeah, so what I do is I make the Keurig coffee, and then for an extra boost, I pour that into the French press with pre-ground coffee already in there, and that makes it more coffee. And then I shake the French press a lot, like as if it were a milk frother. Yeah, get maximum exposure of water to coffee. Send that clip to Dusty. I want to hear what he says to that.
Yeah, I want him to talk to me again. Smaller number 2, new offensive line starters in 2021 or lighting implements in James's house not purchased by someone currently residing there.
I didn't see the number 10 when I was making the... Okay, interesting. I'm going to go with new offensive line starters in 2021.
How many do you think there's going to
be? 1.
Yeah, that's going to be the smaller number then. Let's move on to Don from Ohio, who asks a relationship/legal question. He said, 5 years ago, my brother lost his wife in a freak accident. She turned to dust without just like right in front of him, along with millions of others. He was distraught/traumatized by this event. He became a widower and had, I'm correcting his grammar on this. How dumb is this? Became a widower and had to raise 3 children on his own. I thought he was going to go with a Hawkeye thing here. My brother fought through this horrific incident and found another amazing woman who he married 3 years later. 2 weeks ago, his first wife magically popped back into the kitchen while making dinner. It's almost as if somebody snapped their fingers and poof, she's there. Obviously, he was elated to see her and the kids were overjoyed to have their mom back. But this leads to several questions. Who should he pick to have as his wife? Should he have to pay back the life insurance money that was set up by his wife in case she died? Should he have to ask for his money back from the funeral home? Who should he sue for his mental anguish? Now,
okay, so first of all, he should just get therapy. I mean, this just seems like something that would be like, if you got therapy, it would be a lot easier to navigate. 1. 2, there's no way in the world that life insurance would pay out in an event where, let's say, approximately half the people on the planet, disappeared and or died. No way. Insurance companies would absolutely find a way out of paying that out.
So I was talking to a friend who works in insurance shortly after the movie came out.
About this?
What was that?
You asked about this?
No, I didn't ask specifically about this, but I was talking to him about the movie, and he had said that he was finding it hard to imagine like the logistical nightmare that would have happened as everyone called in their insurance claims at that point, and just like I think you even referred to it as the insurance apocalypse. because of state laws and everything that actually are involved in determining, missing persons cases as opposed to like deaths, because in some cases, in some states, you actually have to mark the person, you have to declare the person as dead before you get it. And that typically is 7 years for them
for missing persons.
Yep. And the SNAP only lasted for 5. So,
well, and I would imagine that also, so some of these people, quote unquote, go missing, but other people dissolved into dust before witnesses' eyes.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's a little bit different too.
Yep. So there ends up being a gray area there, or, say the pilot of a plane was turned to dust, but the people who were on that plane did not turn to dust, so they still died.
Or actually, you don't know if they turned into dust, right?
Well, you don't find
their identify some bodies, right?
Yeah, but you don't find their dust.
Don't go identified, right? But you get the manifest, and you say, well, they were in a plane crash. We didn't identify their body, but I mean, they're dead.
Yeah, so there's plenty of of kind of gray areas there, but yeah, he was referring to it as like the insurance the insurance apocalypse, as to like the paperwork and everything that would end up like resulting.
I mean, I imagine from his perspective that makes sense, but I just think that insurance companies would make their case legally, right, at a federal and state level, and they would lobby for whatever politicians still exist, that they would not have to pay out. Or
it turns out that, like as we've watched over the past, year, the government ends up putting the insurance companies in a bailout situation. I mean, like, okay, well, we need something to stimulate this. We need something to get things moving again. So, we need to pass legislation that says that they're able to pay it.
$600 once. Yeah,
exactly. Maybe twice if you're lucky. And you maybe only get the $600 the one time because you used a tax software that is apparently not something the federal government knows how to refund you correctly in the right amount of time. So now you're sitting here waiting until February 1st to get your second check. Oh, sorry, that's me.
Or your income was too high in 2019 and no one realized that in 2020 your income situation changed, maybe. Just one of those things.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.
Yeah, right. Anyway, I think that insurance companies would find a way to not pay out. But if they didn't, or if there was a way for federal subsidies to allow a payout to occur or to cushion the blow for insurance companies, for that to happen, I don't think once it happens that insurance companies would be able to get that money back. Like, I don't think. So as much as I am cynical about the power of insurance companies to prevent the payout, I am also optimistic about their ability to not do anything once the payout occurs. That money is just friggin' gone. But I do think that there would probably just be federal bailouts in place, assuming that there's enough of a tax base. Although, money's fake, you can just go into debt. It's my take now. Money is vibes, but you can.
So is the cap.
But yeah, once those pay out, I don't think that insurance companies will be able to get their money back. So there's that. Should he ask for his money back from the funeral home? I don't know. Did you ask the funeral home to do stuff? Because they still did the thing without a body. Like, they didn't like embalm anything, right? So no, I don't think so.
It's likely at that point you're just getting memorial things from them. You're not actually, and if you had a small ceremony, you had a small ceremony. I can't even imagine how many people would like be in line to have like a small ceremony or whatever. You'd get real tired of going to those after like a couple of weeks.
I think that the amount of labor that funeral homes went through, morally, he should not ask for his money back from whatever labor that they performed.
No.
Who should he sue for his mental anguish? This seems like a big public event, and I think that people would find out who did it. And I think that you may not be able to sue the person responsible because their head might be chopped off.
Or they might have also turned to dust.
Yeah, also possible. So there's all of that. As for who he should pick as his wife, that sounds like a question that he needs to spend like a month on his own, right? Like, obviously not like literally isolated in a room, but like, what are his feelings? Like it sounds like, though that he found closure at the exact wrong time, it sounds like his life has moved on, that he has lived for 3 to 5 years in a completely different state of mind, and is now a different person that has formed a completely new set of memories and relationships and obligations to this other person. And so if he feels like he's still in love with this other person after this event, he himself should not feel guilty about, quote unquote, picking the new woman as his wife. That said, should be completely sympathetic to the insane trauma that would cause the person to just pop back into existence.
Yeah, there's a lot of serious questions end up being asked there. Personally, I think the guy should just be locked into a room with a TV and a DVD player and just pop in Castaway, and just like, you're not allowed to leave for the next 4 hours. You're gonna have to watch it twice. This is the situation you found yourself in. Deal with it.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at on
that. They should, after all of that, after you've processed all of that, the conclusion is probably, and he'll probably come to this conclusion on his own, they should fight each other.
They should fight to the death?
I didn't say to the death. Jeez, James.
I just wanted to know where you stood on this.
Yeah, probably take away most weapons, but not all of them.
Well, as long as I'm not coming off as the most barbaric person here, I'm actually totally fine with this.
You're the one that said to the death, so you're the barbaric person.
I was asking to the death as a question to you. I wasn't suggesting it.
I wanted to even assume that was in the realm of possibility.
All I wanted to do was clarify what you were saying. That doesn't mean that I was suggesting that that's something they should do. I just wanted to know how far you wanted to take this.
In the universe of possibility, I hadn't even considered that idea.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure that's something.
It hadn't occurred to me as a possibility.
No, the vibes hadn't reached you there. All right, that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. I'm finally warming up to the episode title. Arif, what do you have to plug?
I haven't written anything since the 12th, and for that I apologize. I will be writing an article soon. I've already contacted my editor about this. So there's that. I've been held up by stuff in the news. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but there is a news, and it concerns the state of things. And that is why I haven't written anything. But if you want my take on all of that, of course, you can head over to wideleftpodcast.com, where I've posted a recent podcast episode. Also, Ben Natan and I have recorded another episode that was recorded a month ago that we were actually going to release last week, but then a news happened. And so we didn't. So there's going to be another one coming out soon. I'm going to wait to see if there is a news tomorrow, which is to say for most of you today, regarding the state of things, capital T things. And if there isn't, then we'll release that episode because it revolves around the presidential candidate, the cabinet. If there is a news, I'm going to wait because it seems kind of a weird time to talk about the Secretary of the Interior or whatever. So if you want my political takes, you can head over to wideleftpodcast.com. Otherwise, I'm going to have an article up soonish, I guess, on the Vikings over at theathletic.com/author/Arif-Hassan.
It does seem, and I don't mean to be critical because enough people are critical of your release schedule at Wide Left. It does seem like if there's one thing that's worse for pre-taping than football, it would be a political podcast.
Oh, yeah. No, it's awful. No, it isn't that we plan on pre-taping. It's that I take a month to edit.
So what you're saying...
I'm bad at this.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying I'm much better. I am saying that our show has 1 million listens, and we should be proud of that. So thank you guys again one more time for listening to the show. Really do appreciate it. We will be doing the Super Bowl watch along on February 7th for the actual Super Bowl itself. So if you're interested, patreon.com/NorseCode. For Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that all things are possible through the power and grace of Ben DiNucci. And we'll be back in about 2 weeks. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's official Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can also find his written work at theathletic.com. I am your podcast host and producer, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at BigMono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can make a recurring monthly contribution by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. A donation of $3.50 per month does get you bonus material from the show and much more. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.